All right, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call to order this board policy meeting for the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees. And I will ask our clerk, Trustee Andrew Cottle, to do the roll call, please.
All right, thank you. President Raymond.
Present.
Vice President Taylor.
Wait, I'm here.
All right, and I am here. Trustee Calvert.
Here.
Trustee Kennedy.
Here.
Trustee Minetto.
Here.
Trustee Simon Holland.
Here.
I think I got everybody. Madam President, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Trustee Cottle. The next item on our agenda is public comment. This is general public comment. We are joined today by a new-ish recording secretary, Jean, and I'm gonna, I think, get this last name wrong. Now I can't find the last name, sorry. Kavilia. Jean, thank you so much. Is it Jean or?
It's Jeannie.
Jeannie, I apologize. Jeannie Kavilia. Do we have any public comment for our policy meeting today?
No, there's no public comment at this time.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, agenda item 1.04 is action to adopt the agenda. It is our recommendation that we move agenda item 2.09 to be heard first, so that Ms. Gina Sessions, our presenter on that item, can then be move on with her day. So we'll have here 2.09 first, and then the others, if that is the pleasure of the board. And I see Trustee Simon Holland's got her hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to note on 2.01, the item is set up to make no revisions, and I wanted to suggest a revision. So I will move to approve the agenda or adopt the agenda, moving 2.09 up first, but also wanted to make note that on 2.01, I would request a revision. We'll still hear the item, and that's the purpose of hearing the item.
I have a motion.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Trustee Simon Holland, second by Trustee Minetto. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. So then we will begin with agenda item 2.09. And this is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9200, harassment and discrimination prohibited, more specifically clarify the policy and its purpose, to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. This is for possible action.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. We're joined, I should have said, by Ms. Gina Sessions.
Thank you, President Raymond. Happy to be here. Hello, board members. I am presenting this policy today. The Office of General Counsel generally we've taken on revising the policies that are in the 9000 series. And so I think you're going to hear a number of policy revisions today. This policy, since it's harassment and deals with harassment and discrimination, falls more generally under the Department of Civil Rights Compliance. So I looked at this policy and some related regulations and policies that also deal with discrimination and harassment. One of our goals, and I'm sure Mr. Rombardo will speak in more detail about this, was to streamline some of these policies and to take some repetitive language out and to make sure that we didn't have overlapping policies. And so this particular policy, we do have a student policy 5700 that prohibits discrimination and harassment of students, and it is kind of our bullying policy, anti-bullying policy. And we have related regulations that go along with that. Also, board policy 4400 is the anti-discrimination policy for staff members. We thought this, I believe this policy is important. This is for the Board of Trustees and is more of an umbrella policy that hits all of the areas that the student policy and the staff policy don't pertain to. So anything that is not already covered by the student and staff policies, this would make clear that discrimination, harassment are prohibited in any district facilities or activities. So that was one purpose. And a second purpose in amending this policy has to do with the new Title IX regulation that was issued by the Department of Education and went into effect August 14th, 2020. And I hope that you all had the opportunity to read our Office of General Counsel quarterly report, where I tried to kind of run down our response to those regulations and the work that we're doing around that. So this policy includes language that makes clear that our district is in compliance with the new federal regulations. So you'll see that language also included in the board policy. So that's an overview. And so I'm available to answer any questions you have about the specific changes that we've made. One other thing I will mention is that there was some overlap with this policy and accessibility issues, which seems like a topic for a different policy for a different area. And so I tried to narrow this just to a prohibition against discrimination and harassment that was complementary to those other policies that we have as a board and a district.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Sessions. That makes a lot of sense. Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Gina, for the great work that you do to keep us in compliance and really lead that effort for us. I totally in support. I was just curious that in the definitions, harassment, the list of things that are unwelcome conduct that is based on that list is a slightly different list than what is in the, where is it, policy under 1A1. For example, sexual orientation and ancestry are not in the definitions under definition number 1. I don't think it's a big deal. I just wanted to see if there was a reason for that, or
it may be an oversight, and I'll double check that because we do want to make sure that we have a consistent definition. And so what were the things it was that you mentioned?
Sexual orientation isn't in there. It says race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, but it doesn't say gender identity, and it doesn't say, or expression. It doesn't say, genetic information. It doesn't include sexual orientation. There's several of those things in that 1 through whatever it is, 14.
Right. Okay. And it may be the difference between what the federal law definition is and state law definition, but I'll definitely add in those state law protections because we want to make sure that that's clear, that those gender identity, sexual orientation are included from the state definition.
Great, yeah, because I can see where it might be confusing to somebody if we define it one way in one place and another way in another place, so.
Okay, I'll make sure that it's consistent across the policies.
Great. That was all I had. I'm happy to make a motion when you need it, Madam Chair or President.
I don't see any other hands up. Any other questions, concerns? Okay, I will take you up on that offer, Trustee Simon Holland.
Okay, so let's see. I would move that we recommend revisions as noted to conform the definitions of harassment, and that we, on Board Policy 9200, and we, let's see, and we forward it to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Trustee Simon Holland, second by Trustee Kennedy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Gina.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much. Okay, that takes us then to agenda item 2.01. And this is a discussion and update on Office of the General Counsel's rewrite of Board Policy 9000 series as previously requested by the Board of Trustees to include discussion on board policies from 9050 to 9405, more specifically possible action to make no revisions or changes to board policies 9075, 9080, 9082, 9085, 9088, and 9100. This is for possible action.
Hi, good afternoon, President Raymond, Superintendent McNeil, trustees. So today we will walk through the district or the Office of General Counsel's rewrites pursuant to the motion in June by the Board of Trustees to look at the 9000 series. The purpose of this item 2.01 is to kind of let the board know where we're at and our intent. I do know, and I did get an email that Trustee Simon Holland does want to make a change to 9075. We would have to bring that back as a separate item because, you know, we got the email today, which is fine, but we noticed it as a no change, so we could bring that back in the November board policy meeting. Our intent in the Office of General Counsel is to finish reviewing the 9000s for you by November. We are also hoping to add an additional board policy that lays out the public bodies in the Washoe County School District. We think it's important that those bodies that you've adopted pursuant to your ability to adopt advisory bodies be listed and their clear roles and the mission of those public bodies be laid out in a policy. Currently, there are policies that are mishmashed throughout different sectors and of different series of the policies, and we believe that that creates confusion. There's also inconsistency between policies and regs. So our hope is that we finish. Today we'll be presenting 14 different policies. I believe there's 18 total in the 9000 series, which leads us with 4 left to review. Add back in 9075, so I guess that's 5 to review. And my hope and intent is to draft a 6th policy that will lay out all of the public bodies in the district. And the last thing that I will ask the board to approve once we have all the policies adopted is to allow us to renumber these in a better system. What I mean by that, for example, would be we have a general board policy on public bodies, which is 9100. And what I would like to do is the policy that I'm talking about with regard to adopting public bodies and all the different public bodies that we have in the district might be 9150, for example, but put the policies next to each other because as of right now, we have policies that are incongruent in as far as numbering goes. So are there any questions on that part of, that's just a real nutshell on where we're at. Our team is, I feel like we've gotten a lot done, and we're pretty excited about finishing this off and making these better for the board. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. I think it's really, really great work. And I know how much time went into it when there were a few other things on your plate over there in the office.
Yeah.
The general
Thank you.
counsel. So,
Yeah.
but just hugely impressive that you got so many of them ready for us today. And thank you and your entire team for getting us to this point. And I know I speak on behalf of all the trustees when I say that. So
Thank you.
Trustee Simon Holland. You're
There
on
you
mute.
go. Thank you. Yeah, I was trying. Thank you, Madam President. And I echo that, policies are often the last thing that anybody ever gets around to. And so many organizations have, systemic failures because they don't have good policies. So I really echo President Raymond's comments. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to, to just respond, Neil, and maybe, talk me out of this question. And then we can not have to worry about it separately. But under 9075, and I know everybody doesn't have that in front of them, but 3B says the board shall be notified, but action not be necessary when implementation of the program or initiative, and sub 1 aligns with a previously approved goal or objective of the district's strategic plan. 2 serves to implement an adopted policy of the board, and or 3 aligns with a line item of the district's adopted annual budget. And I really appreciate that these sections were added to board policy to keep board members apprised, keep trustees apprised of changes, as we had talked about when this was brought up previously, that affect a lot of people. It's great for the board to know. Under that B3 aligns with a line item of the district's adopted annual budget. I just want to make sure I understand the intent that the board would just receive notification that we're doing something that's a line item of the budget. And my concern was board members, certainly myself, I'm not familiar enough with the line items of the district's budget to really know, the implications of every single line item. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts with me.
Yeah, so I do see your point. This is the one that we just created recently at your request,
Right.
if I recall correctly. And I think that's why I didn't touch it. I didn't look at it as, to be frank, I didn't look at it as in depth because we had just done it and just passed it. And I do see your point. I do think that's a difficult task to ask.
Well, if you're comfortable and we want to bring it back for discussion, I know the board can't discuss it today because it's noticed for no action.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want you to do extra work if it's not something that you see any merit in, or superintendent sees any merit in. I know, how difficult it is for board members to have that much familiarity with everything that's, in the line items.
Well, here's how I read it, and I could be reading it incorrectly. In my mind, if we were to pass an initiative that failed to align with the line item, then we're obligated to give you notice, because it says the board shall be notified, but action may not be necessary when implementation of a program or initiative that aligns with a line item in the district. Oh, that aligns with it, not doesn't align with it. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't mind bringing it back. I really don't. Okay. Let's do it right. If you don't like it, let's bring it back and get this done correctly.
Well, I'm I don't want a board member down the road to say, oh, that's a gotcha, you know.
Yeah.
You tried to push this past me just because it was in the budget and this is a huge deal and I didn't realize that's what we were approving.
Let me do this. I will make that suggested edit and go through 9075 a little closer. And so I'll
Okay.
bring that one back to you in November. I don't have a problem with that. I'd rather
Great.
do it right than avoid the work. So,
Okay, great. I appreciate it. And again, I am very, very grateful for the intention of 9075. And so I appreciate that because I think we'll be better served down the road if we're crossing T's and dotting I's on that one.
absolutely. So that being said, I would ask for a motion then that allows 9080, 9082, 9085, 9088, and 9100 to all stay the same. Quickly, 9080, we just edited those, I believe, in June. They were passed. 9082, again, June. 9085, June. 9088, June. 9100, we passed earlier this year, I believe in March. And there is one small typo, which the board policy allows our office to fix typos. So I'll make that edit to it. I have a note to myself to get that done. But beyond that, those are, as far as this office is concerned, we feel like those are good and ready to go.
I'd be happy to make that motion, President Raymond, since I'm already off mute.
Yep, thank you.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion by trustee Simon Holland and a second by trustee Kennedy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Great, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Great.
Next up is 2.02. And this is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9050, Board of Trustees Governing Mission, more specifically to clarify the policy and its purpose to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. This is for possible action. And we'll turn it back over to Neil.
All right. Good afternoon, President Raymond, Superintendent McNeil, trustees. My hope is, and what I'm going to do here, I've got them all preloaded, is share my screen with you for each policy, and then we can go through them. So can you all see that? Did I do that correctly? Great.
Looks great.
And so let me do a little introduction for each one briefly, and then I'll go through the changes that I see. And then I know Trustee Simon Holland sent a few changes, and we can make those if you wouldn't mind guiding me through where they're at on here. And if any other trustees have any recommended changes, we can make those. And then what we would like is you to pass it and get it to the board meeting and hopefully get this done before the new year. Basically what we did on 9050 is we're trying to clean up who's in charge of responsible offices. So you'll see some changes up there. In this case, it's the office of the superintendent. And when I looked at the policy and read it myself, it seemed obvious to me that the governing model, this is really the governing model of the Board of Trustees. It's not the governing mission. That you handle that in other areas, your strategic plan, et cetera. This is how we're going to govern, is what the policy was really written as. And as you know, the board several years ago took on the task of adopting the balanced governance model. So I just reworked the purpose statement to make what I felt like fit how this board wants to govern this entity going forward. I moved a couple sections around. If you can see this pink section, I've left my notes on here. I don't have a problem sharing them with you. These were my thoughts. So you know the process that we used is we kind of read the policies, realized where the policies, what they stood for, what they meant, and then when there was duplication, we tried to clean up the duplication and make it fit into the appropriate place. I felt this was duplicative with other sections of the policy, so I took it out in the pink section where, can you see my mouse also? I'm not sure what you can and can't. Okay, so that's why I removed this section. You'll see my note over here. I changed the definition. I felt like this was a little cleaner. Again, if you disagree, please tell me. We can change whatever. This is, I believe, will work in red lines just like we have on here. I deleted this. I didn't think it was necessary, and I felt it was redundant to later areas. I also took pieces of this, if I recall correctly, and moved it up here as well. You can see here is just more cleaning up. I wanted to make sure that our students and the families were recognized in our governance commitment. So we added the term families, because granted, students first, but one thing that we've tried to adopt in the Office of General Counsel is it's students, families. That's 1, 2 in all of our sentences. And we know that that's important to the board and the superintendent. Deleted these sections, didn't think they were necessary, or moved them. You can see this was moved to 9051, which is coming up. What I also, just so you know, as an aside, 9088, which we put a moratorium on, I have taken many pieces out and have a new 9088 that I'll present to you in hopefully November, if all things go as planned. The superintendent is the chief executive officer, not the educational leader. That's actually in the statute. And I think we should recognize that, because not only is her role as the educational leader, but also as the chief executive officer for the entity. A couple cleanup things. This is covered, the sentence that my mouse is over right now is covered in 9100. And I think for the most part, some punctuation issues, some minor cleanups. These sections that you can see, this was already found in 9051. Now, when I say it was already in 9051, it may not be those exact sentences, but the meaning is there. And what we want to avoid, and what you need to avoid in any policy, and I'm sure because Katie just spoke to it, she's dealt with this in the past, and as you all probably have, you don't want policies that conflict with each other, because then you're putting us as your legal counsel in a bad spot, because how do I advise you which one takes precedent over the other? And more importantly, you put the community in a bad spot, and you put our students and families, the folks that we just talked about, in saying, well, is it 9050 or is it 9051? We don't want to do that. So I tried to remove what I thought were redundancies. And so when I say already in this policy, please note it may not be the specific words, but the intent of that sentence, the meaning of those sentences are already in there. Again, this was repeated in a different policy. So I don't think I need to belabor it. I left my notes on there so you could read them. That was our goal, is to simplify these things, I should say, policies. Whenever you're writing law, we always believe that you want to keep it simple. And we believe in that, especially because this is our outward messaging of how our board is going to act. And so to keep it simple is very important, we believe. And Katie, I know you had some suggestions, so I don't know. I'll just turn it over to the president, and then President Raymond, you can go from there.
Great. And I will pass it on to Trustee Simon Holland. I see her hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. Couple of small things on 2D. We would take out the apostrophe S, ensures that the district reflects transparency and accountability, because we deleted the word image. That was a little dumb thing. And then in 3A, let's see, I'm just being really, accordingly, the board shall use its. There shouldn't be an apostrophe there. I'm just being really picky.
No, that's not picky. That's actually a pet peeve. I can't believe I missed that one. So yeah. Good.
And then on 3F and G. So 3F, maintain a professional relationship with district leadership, faculty, and staff. And then all board member requests for significant data or reports, reporting community or staff complaints or concerns should be made through the superintendent. That one I'm okay with. That one's fine. And I'll withdraw my concern about that one. Let's see. Okay, and I'll withdraw my concern about G as well, because this is the significant assistance and substantive staff assistance. So I'll withdraw my concerns about those. I do have concerns later about trustees having the opportunity to communicate directly with leadership team members and copy the superintendent. So I'll talk about those later. So just those two typos is all I had.
Sure, that's great. And we'll talk about those other items in the communication policy, I
Right.
would think. So, good.
Thank you.
Neil, this is Melina, and I had just one note. At the top under definitions for balanced governance, and the other policies, when it refers to balanced governance, it kind of talks about the overreach micromanagement part, but then it also refers to the disengagement, because you do sort of want to land in that middle zone. And so I'm just wondering if we could add something to the definition that references the disengagement piece. The rubber stamping of administrative proposals is sort of how it's referred to, and it's mentioned in the other policies to come. So it just seemed like it would be appropriate to put it in this.
Sure. So we could do discourages micromanagement of the superintendent and district staff while setting out a constructive role for trustees. And we could put the word monitoring student outcomes and engaging in something along those lines of district engagement in district. I mean, you have to help me on what you're looking for. This was theirs out of the book.
Yeah.
Because this is all of this language, just so you know, is something that was given to us by our previous consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Owlsbury, I believe is his name.
Policy 9051, there's a similar sort of, it's not under definitions, but it just has balanced governance model. And it just says that we avoid operating through either micromanagement, overreach in operations, or in parentheses, or disengagement in parentheses, rubber stamping of administration proposals. You know, the other ones don't reference specifically the superintendent, which makes it a little trickier here, because it is, and I'm wondering, as I'm saying it, if we do kind of keep it bigger, district-wide kind of reference instead of just that micromanagement of the superintendent and staff. And is it okay to reference another policy, that the next policy? Because I can say
I prefer not to reference other policies, but I have no problem integrating that. Let me ask the board, because I'm not the best at this. What can you see right now? Do you see 90051? Because that's what I'm looking at. Or do you still see 9050?
No, we see, let's see.
We see 9050.
Okay.
Yeah, 50.
Okay, I
But
just
it
wanted
is, that language about disengagement is in the next definition of informed oversight, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It is. Good point. I should have caught that. So that might, so maybe what we do is in the balanced governance definition above, we use the term informed oversight, and then somebody can say, well, what does informed oversight mean? And there it is. So we say something along the lines of, by ensuring a balance of governance that discourages micromanagement in the superintendent and district staff, while still setting out a constructive role for trustees in informed oversight or with informed oversight. And then it is broader than just monitoring student outcomes, because I think you actually do that, number one. And number two is it then meets your point of disengaged as opposed to engaged, right? Would that be something, would that interest you? So like this, are you seeing my changes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure glad this is working, because if this didn't work, it would have been a long day. How about with informed oversight? How's that? And I would delete this part that I'm starting to. Does that work?
I think that's fine. I missed it. I apologize. In the informed oversight, it's interesting that, because I know that you all didn't write that came straight from Owlsbury. and that it's kind of referenced differently in the proceeding. So I think that works though for me. I appreciate. Kristen, I saw your hand was up.
No, that's what I was trying to figure out is, if it was already within the definition of informed oversight, how would we be able to just integrate it in a, that was perfect. It was great.
Okay. Is there anything else that the board would like in this one? And are we okay with, well, I guess you'll vote to decide whether or not you're okay with that.
I don't see any other hands up. And we don't have our cheat sheet to make the motions today, so.
That might be my fault, but how about a motion to accept board policy 9050 with the revisions made today's meeting and forward to a meeting of the Board of Trustees?
I move that.
Okay.
I can't make the motion, but somebody could say so moved.
I didn't say it. I move it. I just said it. I move it.
Second.
Motion by Vice President Taylor, second by Trustee Manetto. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Great, thank you very much. 2.03 is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9051, Board Conduct, Ethics, and Operational Protocols, more specifically to clarify the policy and its purpose to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. Back to you, General Counsel.
Okay. Let's do, all right, 9051, Board Conduct, Ethics, and Operational Protocols. In Board Policy 9050, it points out that as part of the balanced governance model, this is an important policy to have, obviously. So again, similar to the last one, we've cleaned up the office of who the responsible office is. And then I felt that the purpose statement was obtuse, so we boiled it, we made it, simplified it. We took on paragraph, so this one was interesting, and I went through and looked at some of the writings that I could find about balanced governance model and the different terms. Vanjie, who I know we all think is great, she brought me information around this as well. And we had these paragraphs that were A and B, and there's a C and a D and an E. Anyway, all of those paragraphs were added by us. I'm not sure why, and I don't think they're necessary. They seem redundant to me. So I took all of those out throughout. These terms here, the balanced governance characteristic 1, characteristic 2A, and characteristic 2, for whatever reason, is the only one that has two parts, if I recall correctly. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I believe there was only 7. Oh no, I guess there's more. 10, whatever it is. 10. Those are actually what's in balanced governance. So that's why we took all of that other, we chose to take all those other clauses out. They didn't serve a purpose. Did a little cleanup here on the F paragraph. Just kind of a wording issue. Thought this was a better way of wording it. Didn't think G was one of the ones that supplemented 7. Didn't think it was necessary. So that's really all we did with this one. Then, as you can see down here, we felt that this paragraph was included above. This paragraph was included in 3 below. So it was kind of some issues of it bouncing around. We thought this cleaned it up. This one, we moved this section to 9110. Apparently I misspelled the word protocols, my apologies. And I think that covers it for the most part, is my recollection on this one. Yeah, that's at least our suggested changes.
All right, thank you. Trustee Simon Holland and then Trustee Cottle.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to invite discussion among our colleagues about 1C and 1G. And on 1C, the new 1C, the last sentence, the paragraph is good, that, you know, focus on common interests, seeking to understand multiple and varied positions of all district constituencies, supporting shared mutually beneficial solutions that can be applied to many students and achieved through various means. And then it says trustees avoid taking political or ideological positions that often polarize constituent views. And I think that's a really hard one to implement. For example, you know, let's talk about share. You know, that is very controversial and polarizing for many people in the community. And but the trustees are required to take positions on that. I think that the paragraph is strong enough without the last sentence. I think I would propose that we delete the trustees avoid taking political or ideological positions that often polarize constituent views. You know, it's really in the eye of the beholder. And there are many things that we have taken positions on, guns in classrooms, that are polarizing. So that would be one suggestion for discussion. And then the other one is on 1G. And under 1G, let's see, 1G, the last sentence is trustees avoid actions to tell and sell their position. And I would take that out as well. I like, you know, the rest of the paragraph, use our voice to seek to hear and understand each other's interests and support mutually beneficial resolution and reconciliation. I think it's strong enough there. You know, again, it's in the eye of the beholder whether one of us is being an effective, respectful advocate, or we're trying to, you know, sell our position. So those would be my two suggestions, to take those out and just have that discussion, because I think the paragraphs are strong enough in their intent without them.
I think as one trustee that those are very good points. I don't have any concerns about that. Trustee Cottle.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to agree with what Trustee Simon Holland just said. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then Neil, to you and your team, thank you for all the work on this. My only one thing that jumped out at me on this policy, has some discussion, is on 4D.
4D. Let me, if you would be patient with me, let me do this.
Page 15. When you're done with that, it's hard to
Yeah.
find.
And then down to, I'm sorry, you said 4D?
4D, it's on page 15.
Okay.
I guess I'm not curious on the historical significance of this item. I guess for me, knowing that we are elected, I'm not a huge fan of someone from the Nevada Association of School Boards or any external force to come in to essentially tell a trustee how to do his or her job. I know that this is a sequence of events that is very long. When at the end of the day, trustees can do what they want. The public needs to hold them accountable. But I'm just not a huge fan of 4D. I don't know if anyone else has any strong feelings to keep it. When I read the sequence, it just seemed very out of place when it goes external. So I'll just open it up. I have concerns about how that would play out if it actually had to happen, because if it's in policy, it needs to happen. I just don't know how that would actually go if we ever got to that point. Knock on wood, hopefully it never happens.
Thank you, Trustee Cottle. Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. Might I suggest that we just take out a member of the Nevada Association of School Boards and suggest an agreed upon facilitator? That could be someone internal. It could be a mediator. I think that would make it easier. Does that work for you, Trustee Cottle?
Yeah, that works for me because it's a mutual agreed upon facilitator, and it'll come off a little bit better than we're bringing in the big guns from the Nevada Association of School Boards to kind of chew you out. I guess that's how it kind of came across when I first read it. So that looks good to me. Thank you.
Is the board okay with, I added or mediator? I don't know if, but I thought I heard Trustee Simon Holland say that. And it seems to make sense to me because you might use somebody internally, but you might want to, okay.
Vice President Taylor and then Trustee Minetto.
I was actually just about to lower my hand because I like the suggestion of my colleague, Trustee Simon Holland. Just in response, I will say to what Clerk Caudill said, this was generally what the president put in action, and having just some conversations about other board members from about a particular board member from other board members that we've all recently kind of gone through, if you will. We got down to C in this, and that was the conversation that the president and I had with our former colleague. And so that made me think about if nothing had occurred, or if there was, if that was a bad conversation and so on, and if it had been ineffective, to use the words of the policy, the fourth step, would we have brought in someone from the Nevada Association of School Boards? And the answer is most likely no. And so I do think that that's something that should be said, that should be changed, and I like the recommendation of Trustee Simon Holland.
Trustee Minetto.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I'm in full agreement. I love it, Neil, that we're simplifying and making them so that they're so much more readable. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that.
You bet. Yeah, our team's excited about that, to be honest. It'll make it a lot easier for us to help you.
I, spent some time looking at Section 4, having consulted with it at length a few months ago. And, I was trying to think if anything would have helped the process more. And I think what I've, come to find and even discussed at the Nevada Association of School Board Executive Committee meetings is that, there's just so many different scenarios where you might refer to this section of the policy, and some of them, this will be very helpful. Some of those scenarios, this kind of line of action will be very useful. And there will be other times where more immediate action has to be taken, and it, doesn't necessarily follow that kind of line of action of series of events. So but I, stumbled a little bit when I was reviewing it over H and that kind of last resort part, just because, I was trying to figure out if there is a better way or a different way to word that. And I really don't think it needs to be changed. I think it gets the point across. I was, wasn't wanting it to what I was looking for was, does that insinuate or infer that you are supposed to go through every one of those prior steps before you get to the last resort? And I think the way it's phrased doesn't necessarily mean that. It leaves it open enough. It's a last resort if you're going to go that route. But I think there have been some in these conversations at the state board level. There have been some situations in other districts, and including I think our friends down in the South, where they have used this more, kind of successive line of action where you're working with a trustee on a series of issues that don't necessarily go immediately to the last resort, but you go through the steps. And so I shared this actually at a committee meeting, and they really thought it was well, stated, and we're going to be using some of them. I think we're going to be using something similar moving forward. So a long way of saying I don't have any changes to this policy, but appreciate the work.
Sounds good.
Just trying to eat up some time. Sorry. Trustee Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to say I do agree with Trustee Simon Holland about the removal of those last sentences and those other two. Only because I'm sometimes the more specific you are, the more somebody can try to read into it to say, well, but that's not this, it's something else. And in regard to the suggestion that Trustee Caudle made, I'm just wondering, do we need to add mutually agreed upon facilitator, or are we just going to leave it with because I did hear that with an agreed upon facilitator, or is that sufficient, or do we really need that mutually? Because maybe the rest of the board could agree, but the person involved might not.
Well, I don't think it would be an agreement between the board and the, it says a full board, yeah. It's wait.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's a great, I don't know. Do you all want me to weigh in? I think that's a good suggestion. So I can put that in.
Trustee Simon Holland.
I think that could hold up the process significantly. Okay. I would just say with a facilitator or mediator and take out agreed upon. It's a great point to raise.
So take it out so that we don't hold it up.
Right. I'm imagining, conversations I had with trustees, and I'm sensitive to President Raymond's difficult and sensitive conversations she had to have. And I can only imagine, if you're already at that point with a trustee and there's conduct that's not, desirable, you could get into a real difficult situation of having to have it be mutually agreed upon.
How about that? How about we put selected by the president? Because otherwise, how are we going to know who's going to select the person? It would be my only concern.
Right.
I'm fine with that. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I can imagine a situation where somebody's not going to agree, and then we can't, keep moving.
That's a really good point.
I think that makes sense. Does that work for you, Trustee Kennedy?
Yes, absolutely. That makes more sense.
And Trustee or Vice President Taylor, Trustee Caudle, your hands up. I'm sorry, did you have a?
Yeah, on that same point, I read it again on 4D, and I don't know how we would actually carry that out to say the full board, because that would have to be a public meeting. We really need to be between, I think, the president and potentially vice president and the member in question, so we don't have a quorum issue. And then that just came to me. And my last comment on section 4, I don't really care either way. I guess I'd be looking more towards you, Melina, Katie, Angie, those that have sat in the president's chair. Is E and F overkill? Is it something that we should have? Should we make the process or make the potential options many, and then president can kind of choose how to go about it? I guess I would just open that up if they should stay or if they should go, because it seems like once you get to D, if D doesn't work and it continues, you could potentially go right to the censure. I don't know if we would scold the board in public meeting, have a unofficial censure. It just seems like that's a lot of public meeting time dealing with the problem. that may just need to be dealt with. So I'll just open that up.
Vice President Taylor, do you have thoughts on that or something else?
It was actually something else, but in response, I'm thinking, really, if we're going, let me say a couple of things. One is if we're going to, if we're looking at D, because it's with the full board member and it is a public meeting, as Andrew said, it's almost like D and E almost become the same thing, because it is a public meeting. So that is something to consider, because E is you do it, if we do it as a full board, it's going to be public, and then if we do it again in E and remind them it's still public. I would say that. Let's see. I don't mind the steps there, just because we know they don't have to be followed step by step, and situations are so different. I don't mind the extra steps being there, because I don't feel like what after this conversation we're having tonight, I don't feel like it's saying we have to do each one of these steps successively. So and more often than not, it may be skip right down, but there could be something that comes up that makes some of these other things important. Good options. So I don't mind leaving them in, as long as we aren't held to, you have to do this and then this and then this and then this. So that might require, if this isn't effective, being changed, or some statement in here that at after a certain point, after say D, or after C rather, or yeah, after C or D, then they don't have to be followed. Every single step may not be followed. And I think before I say whatever I'm going to say, which goes in a total different direction, we should maybe let's have Trustee Simon Holland weigh in, so we don't change.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Perhaps at the top of 4, that second sentence, the governance process includes, we could change that to say the governance process may include, not necessarily in this order, the following steps. Does that work for people?
I think it does, based upon my comments, because it doesn't take away other options that may be appropriate in a particular situation. But if they aren't appropriate, you can jump down. And really, the president's going to be involved in a lot of this, because we won't be in front of a public meeting more often than not until we get down to some of these more grave steps.
And,
let me suggest that if we're not going to do it progressively, we need to get rid of the word I have highlighted, because that's like progressive discipline. It does contemplate that you're going step by step. And I'm not suggesting we have to. This is not our language. So however, if this is the way the board wants to go, I think you should get rid of that.
Yeah, I would agree, but then add at the end after may include, comma, not necessarily in this order.
I think that is a good suggestion, and just based, like I said earlier, on kind of reviewing this, I think it's good to keep in E and F. I see the point about D, and the kind of intent is that intended to be a full public meeting with a self-evaluation, and I don't necessarily think it is. I think it's part of that sort of annual self-evaluation process, but that's not very clear here, and it does make it seem like it's a special added kind of level of evaluation. So that one's a little trickier. I don't know if maybe then you do say, discussion during the annual board self-evaluation between the offending member and the full board, to make it clear that it wouldn't be a special agenda item on a meeting, and also wouldn't be breaking public meeting laws. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
Well, even if you're doing a board annual self-evaluation, oh, you're saying you would do those privately and then turn those in, because that starts to follow the open meeting law either way. I think you should just get rid of the paragraph if you're uncomfortable with doing this in public.
I think the idea would be that every year during sort of a board training type of workshop where we've, have had Dr. Ellsbury come, or, more recently when we went to the Silver State Governance, they just sort of did an evaluation type of thing like this, that it's, a sort of a work session training type of scenario where this would happen. In terms of the actual progressive process thing that we're getting rid of the word progressive, I don't know how, important I think it is. I think it is important for all of us as trustees to go through an evaluation process, a self-evaluation process each year. It feels, if it were part of a sort of a disciplinary component of working with a trustee, that might not be the most useful out of all of these options. That might not be the best to make it part of this or separate, I guess. So I'm sorry, I see lots of hands. I know Trustee Kennedy, yours has been up for a while, and then we'll go back to Trustee Otto and Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. And Mr. Lombardo, you know where I'm coming from on this thinking as a principle, the whole progressive discipline that has been, it's ingrained with students, with staff. So getting rid of that, I understand, but then I'm looking at the wording of if this is ineffective, because it sounds progressive, and if what is ineffective now? So now do we just change the wording to if other steps are ineffective, or because it reads progressive to me as somebody who's had to do it year in, year out over a period of time. And it does, if this is ineffective, meaning if what's, does that make sense? If what's ineffective now, if the stage before that is how I would normally read it. So if we're going to eliminate progressive and say that we can use any of these steps, then do D through H, D through G, then H being the last resort. Do those become if other steps have proven? Am I reading it correctly?
I think you're reading it absolutely correctly, and I was waiting to let the trustees go through this, but I think it needs to be almost a list. You see how I'm changing it now? And then we put terms like, instead of the board, they shall, they may. Because if we're going to make it optional, which is the point up above, then we need to give these options, right? So so step one that starts the process is one board member comes to the president and complains about another, reports an issue with another board member. The board president then shall meet with the offending board member and remind them of their pledge. But so all of that becomes permissive. These are options for them to do, right? So I would need some time to rework this. I just need to know what paragraphs you want left in. But if this is ineffective, does connotate progression. It has to, otherwise it means nothing.
Not sure which of you is Trustee Cottle or Trustee Simon Holland who was first. So.
Go ahead, Trustee Cottle.
Thank you. That's a great point, Trustee Kennedy. That's a great point. I can definitely see that now. So I was just going to comment on D again. I don't know if this is supposed to sound or actually take place in a different manner the way it reads. I guess the way I read it is that it would almost seem like a board member is in front of the board with a facilitator, if we have a facilitator or a mediator, if that's the intent, it would really be better if it was a small group, such as the president and the facilitator, and keep the full board out of it. And if this is something that we're supposed to be doing, having annual self-evaluations, we should get that added to the calendar. So I don't remember ever doing one since I've been here. And I'm getting close to ending my second year. So if we do want to do this, we should really start doing it, or else we just get rid of this altogether. And then I guess my last comment, Neil, and if you feel it's best to essentially take this policy out and bring it back in November, if you feel like there's enough to kind of work on, or if you want us just to keep working through it, I thought I would throw that out there because I know you have a lot of policies you want to get through today. So,
yeah, we could do that. I just would need to understand where you want to be, or we could get close enough and then forward it on. I could come to the board meeting with the basic changes. So I have a few thoughts on this. One is I don't think the annual self-evaluation really fits here. This is a discipline issue for a trustee that's having a problem not following the board governance rules or some other issue. So I'm inclined to think that paragraph D, this is just my opinion, be taken out, because that is a board meeting. So unless you reduce it down to the president and one other person, which would be consistent with C, shall meet with the board member and a facilitator, but I'm not sure what that does. So what? The other board member says, I don't care. I'm not changing what I did. What did you, I'm not sure what you accomplished there, since you're really doing the same thing in C. So those are my thoughts. And the more we go through this, I just need to know whether you as a board want to keep it progressive or not progressive, because it clearly is written as progressive, and I can modify that. Excuse me. I can modify that to make it not progressive. I don't know if I can do it tonight, but if you tell me to do that, we'll get it done, and then we can still move it forward so that we can get this through the process.
Thank you, Neil. Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. I think the intention of this is to give a roadmap for something that probably should be progressive. The intention is, okay, we'll have the conversation, then we'll have the conversation with somebody else, then we're going to have the conversation in a public meeting, and then we're going to go to censure. So I think, and this has been a great discussion, and I value it tremendously. If this is ineffective, it is unclear, because we don't know what this means in that language. Probably it's, if previous steps are ineffective, and go back to making it progressive, but take out D. I think taking that out entirely, it's really ours to do, to go with that from the board and another board member, then talking about it in a public meeting. I do think that, I think that's the right way to go. And I think you all have made good points, including Neil, that what's a facilitator going to do, and I agree that it doesn't belong in the annual evaluation. And we do in 9055, it does talk about the annual board self-assessment. And I had made a note too, Andrew, that is it too late to do for this board, because we haven't done one since you all have been on the board. So I appreciate that that reflection and that recognition. So I would consider it a progressive system, and I would take out D, just as you've done there. That would be my thought. And take out the but, not necessarily in this order. I think that was an intention to try to give the president more flexibility, but then it doesn't reflect due process for an elected official. So I think we do need to stick with a progressive due process philosophy on this.
would to meet your point about what does this mean, would the board prefer to see it like this? Meaning, if subparagraph B didn't work, the behavior doesn't change after you've informed the person of, here are the policies, then this is the next step, right? You have the private meeting. Then if that doesn't work, we could put here if subparagraph C, and then this way it shows its progression. Would that meet that goal of the term, what does this mean? Because that's what I think that's what I think he was getting at when he wrote these originally.
Yeah, I think that's the intent. And, again, I'm just one person, but I appreciated Trustee Kennedy's comments about, the progressive nature. And that is really, I think, the reading of it, that is what the intention is. And that's what somebody would expect. So I think that's a good idea.
I only concern, I guess, about that is, does that limit, you to, and I hear that I do agree that I think the intent is to be progressive, to go through this, step by step. But if you, as the president didn't find that, I don't know, one of those steps was necessary or worked, then does that limit you to being able to go from A to C, and skipping B, for example?
So yeah, if B doesn't work, can we just go straight to C? So maybe how about this? Put as applicable up there. The governance process includes, and then we can put the following as applicable. Because I think your point is that B doesn't do us any good if you go and think about recent past events.
Yeah. Vice President Taylor, and then I see Trustee Minetto and Trustee Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I can answer a few of the questions, and then I'll make a little bit of a recommendation. The annual self-evaluation is probably just because I've been here the longest, right? It's something we did do on an annual basis. Last year we didn't do it. We had a change of superintendent. We had a lot going on, as you'll remember. So that's why we didn't do it last year. Typically would happen in the fall. And we didn't do it this year because we've been a little busy this year. So it is something. So for those of you who just recently joined the board, you're right, you've never had one, but it is something that we committed to doing on an annual basis and had been doing so until most recently. So hopefully that answers that question. The if this does in fact mean if the one above doesn't, if it's ineffective, then you go, it's like an if then. If this is ineffective, then you go to that is the intention. So it is reading the way that everyone is saying, well, it sounds like it's reading like that. It is reading like that. That was the intention when the board, shortly after I joined the board, a couple of years actually after I joined the board, adopted the balanced governance model. You're right, I agree with Neil, it's not a mission, it's a model. Adopted a balanced governance model and went through these. So that's the intention of that. So it was intended to be progressive. I have a little different take on the facilitator, but I'm not going to lay on the sword for it because it's nothing for me to lay on the sword for. I do think sometimes you have a one-on-one conversation with somebody, you make some agreements, we're going to do this, okay, great, this is how we're going to move forward, and then it doesn't happen, and then perhaps coming back with someone else that might help to mediate that a little bit. Sometimes there are some benefits of that. Not always, certainly, but I have seen that make a difference when you have somebody else in there. Hey, this is what you agreed upon. This is what's not happening. What do we need to do to get there? I think that can be effective. So I disagree a little bit that hey, that does nothing. I think it can be successful. But if it's the pleasure of the board to take D out, I'm just fine with that. And then I also agree that self-evaluation in and of itself doesn't go here. But the intention on that is because if you may recall during the well, some of you can't recall because you've never done it. During the self-evaluation process, we evaluate ourselves, and you also evaluate each of the other trustees. And that's what I think this is referring to. If everyone did a self-evaluation, you evaluate yourself, and let's say we're having trouble with Angie. You don't know what Angie's going to do. She's out there doing whatever. And then everyone, all the other 6 trustees are all weighing in or giving their own assessment. And it's anonymous. You don't know who said what, but we have average scores. And then you see this is what your fellow trustees think of. So in a situation, I understand why that in and of itself is put there, because that's when, if it really is a big board problem and there is a self-evaluation of Trustee Angie who is not acting in the manner that's appropriate, that would come out because the other trustees will have weighed in on that. But that's why that statement is there in that way. It's harder for us to get there because we haven't done that in a couple of years. That was it. Just giving a little clarity and just giving my opinion on a few things. So hopefully that might be helpful.
Thank you. I know still see some hands raised. I just want to double check to see if Trustee Simon Holland, your hand is up directly related to something that Vice President Taylor. Okay, why don't I have you go real quick just to make sure we address that?
Sure, thank you. I think that a facilitator can be helpful. I don't think that what we have here precludes having a facilitator. The board president may, for example, in item C, could choose to have a facilitator be part of it. I don't think that's precluded, and I agree with you, that can be really helpful. Sometimes there's somebody else who is the right person to, to have those conversations. So I just wanted to add, I don't think that waiting for the board self-evaluation or orchestrating having one when we need to deal with a trustee's conduct, I think the board self-evaluation is a great tool, and it is in a different policy, and I think it's still important to do, but I don't think it belongs here. And just again, a facilitator could be invited by the board president in other steps.
Thank you, Trustee Simon Holland. Okay, Trustee Kennedy and then Trustee Minetto.
Thank you, Madam President. Neil, I like the rewording of the if subparagraph C is ineffective. I think it makes it much more clear. And I do agree with keeping this progressive. And although I'm only here to January, I would suggest to everyone that if it is progressive, that you not skip steps. Being someone who's been on the other end of it, if things are going to be clean, it needs to be clean. And I mean, I can tell you so many times where I thought that I could have skipped ahead right to something more extreme, that it was so obvious. So if we think the steps are important enough to be in there, then my belief is that they should be used for that very reason. And I love removing D, and I agree with Trustee Taylor and Trustee Simon Holland that the facilitator can sometimes be helpful, but I do see openings where that could happen without it having to be its own step, because that would just prolong. Because the other thing is that nowhere in here is there a talk about time or a timeline, which I don't think anybody wants to get into. But just being able to know if working with a facilitator has to be its own step, you just prolong things sometimes. So I'm loving where this is going. Thank you.
Trustee Minetto.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I was concerned about the skipping steps too. Even if you know that B isn't necessarily going to work, if we still do the step, then if subparagraph B is ineffective, makes sense. Because if we skip that, then what do we do? Where do we go? But I think it does need to be progressive. Because you wouldn't want to start an open meeting with that kind of thing. That'd be horrible. And it makes sense to start out step by step by step by step. So that's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Minetto. Superintendent McNeil.
Thank you very much, President Raymond. So I'm wondering too, up at the top, we have a board members with a concern about another board member. Realizing that this is really around the governance process, is this strictly from board member to board member, or could potentially a constituent or a staff member also bring a concern to the board chair? I'm just asking. I don't mean to prolong this discussion, but I'm just wondering if you have a trustee that may not be following governance protocol, a constituent may have a concern, or a staff member may have a concern, or the superintendent may have a concern. So I'm just wondering, do we need to delineate that somewhere in here? Just for discussion.
Thank you. You know, as we've been discussing this, really, I think the main point for me of this item is in that header for 4, that this is really about following the governance process policies. Again, in the meeting, or so it would, to me, be really kind of that board level. I think the superintendent would be, in my opinion, involved in that, because one of those issues would be if there were some sort of overreach and direct communication to, you know, let's say, for example, the failure lies in an individual trustee that continually reaches out to principals and talks to them about issues that they have with teachers in that school, which violates our board policy, that a trustee would do that. And that's not something that is a huge earth-shattering problem that needs to be dealt with immediately and ask for a resignation. That's a issue that I see very clearly falling into a scenario where you would kind of go through these steps. But it is a scenario where as a board member, you might not know that was happening unless the superintendent told you about it. And I don't think it would include, to me, any other staff. The principals should go to you, Kristen, or the area superintendents, and report that problem, and then it would come to us. So I don't know how that, you know, gets reframed. And I'll see if any other trustees have suggestions on that. But I do think, I don't know that it would need to include community members or constituents, because I think the constituent would reach out to a board member and the board member would bring that to another board, the board president, or so.
Right. Right. I think you want to avoid trying to legislate every possible issue.
Yeah.
So, you know, in this circumstance, if the superintendent has a problem, she tells you as the president, you're now the board member who has a problem with the other board member.
Okay.
Doesn't, you know, so.
Good point. Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. I was just going to say we could make that more concise and just say concerns about board members shall be brought to the board president privately.
Well, I would be careful about that, because then people are going to say, well, I emailed you, board president. Did you go through the progressive discipline?
Doesn't mean that she has to. It's just.
Well, if that's what the board, it's up to the board.
I do understand the superintendent's concern, and you don't want to make it too, you know, too wide open. But again, just trying to make it concise. That is where concerns about board members should be brought. And you're right, a person may email and the president will say, thank you for your email. You know, I mean, it's, that doesn't mean that I'm compelled. I don't read it as seeing that I'm compelled to do something just because somebody tells me about it. I don't think it, you know, I don't think it reads that way right now. The board president makes a decision about whether to do something or not. And I guess, well, maybe I'm wrong. If B says the board president shall meet with the offending board member, that does box them in. Well, I do understand the superintendent's role in being able, on behalf of staff, to bring a concern. And I appreciate President Raymond's, perspective that this is about governance and it's about trustees. But I know that the superintendent often knows things about board members that board members don't know, and about conduct. So I think the superintendent should be able to be part of that loop somehow.
Trustee Kennedy, I see your hand is up. Did you have a? Okay.
Sorry, I meant to drop it. Sorry.
No problem. Vice President, I'm sorry, Trustee Simon Holland, can you state again your suggestion of how you might include the superintendent?
Well, I didn't specifically include the superintendent. I just said concerns about board members shall be brought to the president privately. Okay. And then maybe we change B to say the board president, if applicable, shall meet with the offending board member and remind them of their pledge. So that the president can decide, does this rise to the level of having the conversation at all? Mm-hmm. I know you have, we took out up as applicable up above. So yeah, maybe, so A would, again, I'm just as one person recommending or suggesting we could say concerns about board members shall be brought to the board president privately. And then under B, the board president, as applicable, shall meet with the offending board member. And I welcome other suggestions.
I think that makes sense to me. I don't, I think that makes sense. Sorry, I'm looking at it while I'm, Trustee Minetto, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam President. I prefer the word may to shall, because the board president, if everybody and his dog is complaining about each of us individually because of something that happened, it could be very valid, but it also could be nitpicking. I'm concerned about the president getting bombarded, which she already is, with a whole lot of emails, and they can be silly and petty. I don't know.
That's part of the job, though.
I guess.
I think to me it should be shall, because I feel like that's what is appropriate. I understand and appreciate you your consideration for that, but I think that's probably the best course. And I think there's further steps that would help, provide that support if it did get to that point. So,
okay.
Trustee Cottle.
Thank you, Madam President. So when we first started, this section really read that if there was a serious concern, serious issue with the board member, this is a process. I think we've started to dip into anyone has a concern about anything, just go to the board president. And the perception that us trustees all report to the board president, that's not accurate. And so I do think we need to be careful on what rises to the level of misconduct and serious violations of board policy, and what is just somebody just doesn't like something. And then, let's go to the board president. I mean, we're all elected and we select the board president. And I think these policies are not meant for this board, they're meant for all boards. And if you get a board president that just wants to start throwing his or her weight around that they are in charge and the boss, that could be a problem. So I get concerned about the perception being, well, just go with the board president for everything, and the board president then takes care of it. And that could get to be significant, especially on hot button issues. They don't like how we voted. They don't like what we said. That's different than somebody decided to show up at the principal's door and say, I don't like what you're doing in the school. And that's different. And so you're concerned about opening up this door to everything, because, 4 presidents from now, he or she may decide, I'm in charge. So the policy says, come to me and I'm going to take care of it. So that'd be my feedback on where we're going with this.
Thank you, Trustee Cottle. I think what differentiates that is that this is specifically about a failure to follow governance. This item 4 is a process to deal with a failure to follow the governance. So it wouldn't include, I don't like the way so-and-so voted, or I don't like, to me, that's separate. That doesn't fall under this item. But that's just my interpretation of it. Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. I was just going to say the same thing. And that is the role of the president in this organization. It is the president's duty to, we elect the president to try to resolve issues just like this. So, and because it is specific to failing to follow governance process policies, I'm comfortable with it. And you do need to have someone who will have those conversations, and the board president is the person under balanced governance who has those conversations. We have to have somebody who can do that. It's inappropriate for the superintendent to have those conversations, and I'm sure Kristen can tell you, situations where it has been, in other boards, they have leaned upon the superintendent to try to solve trustee behavior problems, and it's just, you have to have someone who does that, and the president is the person in our organization who does that. So I'm comfortable with this whole layout.
Trustee Minetto? No, okay. Trustee Cottle, any other thoughts on that? Are you good? Okay. Well, I think that I hope, Neil, that we've given you some direction on kind of what we'd like to see, or I know you were updating as we were going along. Do you feel comfortable with the way it is now, or do you want to bring it back?
I feel comfortable with the way it is now. I did change paragraph 4. It's redundant. There's no reason, if we're going to just list it in progression, we don't need to say the governance process includes it. It's the process that's listed below. And then with regard to A, if I understand correctly, concerns, we're going to be more general about a board member shall be reported to the board president privately. I guess I chose to leave that in because I do think we should be professionals and do it privately, at least internally. And then to Trustee Simon Holland's point in B, if the board president determines it necessary, this way that shall becomes a little permissive in the fact that the board president gets discretion on whether or not he or she feels it's necessary, or I guess to use the word in the paragraph, is the person an offending board member. So the board president receives the complaint, that's a problem, I need to go talk to that trustee, or receives the complaint, I don't see it as a problem, doesn't talk to the trustee. And it is what it is at that point. And otherwise, I think it's ready to go from my perspective, unless somebody disagrees.
I think that looks great. Trustee Kennedy.
I just have one question. Do we leave it offending board member, or is it alleged offending?
Well, it's not going to be voted on, and it's not
Right.
a due
Okay.
process. And I don't want to create this as some type of, I get that it's a process that we're adopting as part of board policy, but I think we can use the word offended. It would, if we put alleged there, then we're going to have to go and find alleged everywhere, and I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
At least legally, it's not.
Thank you.
Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. Perhaps as a suggestion in B, you could just say the subject board member. The board president shall meet with the subject board member, and take out offending. I think that's, I appreciate Trustee Kennedy's thought about that.
What do you want? Then we need to change it. Okay, I would have to change it here, I think, too.
Yeah, it looks like it's in most of them as offending.
Yeah, I think that's a, I think that's a stronger term than we probably need to put in there.
So change offending board member to subject.
That would be one suggestion. Then it's not, then we haven't found them, tried and found them guilty already before the process even, gets going.
But it's still subject board member, right?
That's what I would say. Shall meet with the subject board member instead of offending. Just a thought.
You mean instead of guilty board member? Do you think that's a little strong?
Yeah, that's my weasel word. And if we're really going to be picky, sometimes board members capitalize. Oh, there you go. You got it. Okay.
Okay. That doesn't make sense.
By the time you're censured, isn't it pretty safe to say you're offending?
Well, I guess not until after they vote.
Okay. Okay. I hear you. If we're not.
Well, I'm with you. I think you're an offender up here, because if the board president has decided it's necessary to talk about you, then, but if the board feels more comfortable with the subject, that's fine. It doesn't matter.
Okay, so Neil, on F, it has infracting board members. So what's the difference between the offended and the infracting?
In F right here, in the event.
Yes.
I don't see it. I'm sorry.
Okay, it says F, if this is ineffective, it's kind of towards the end, the last sentence. And
One
F,
up, the old F,
here.
the new, there you go.
oh, I'm sorry, you're on the, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we had the board meeting as needed. I think we have the right.
So I'm just saying, what's the difference if you're saying offensive or offending as opposed to infracting?
I agree with you. I think we should just change it to subject. If we're going to use subject, let's be subject board members' position or statements. Infracting is the same as the offending. I don't know if that was a Dr. Osbury or past administration decision to use those words. I don't know. I try to clean those things up when I found them, or we tried to clean those things up when we found them. That's the best I can answer.
No, that's fine. I was just wondering because we have offending and infracting, and to me, they both kind of mean the same thing. So like you said, if we're going to use one or the other, or use subject, but
Yeah. You're
thank you.
100. I agree with you 100%.
Thank you.
And Neil, I just noticed as you're scrolling there that the old G, new F references a process in that last line there that it would refer back to item E if necessary, which is now the new D. Does that make?
No, I thought I caught that, isn't it, through A through E, because this is part of the process too, E.
Yeah, the last line there though says of that one, model progressive.
Oh, right down here.
That just needs to be a D now.
Okay. There we go. This one right here that I just highlighted. Okay.
Yeah, that looks good. I think that captures a lot of it. Great conversation. And hopefully doesn't need to be used anytime soon.
So we'd be asking for a motion to forward to the board with the changes as, presuming everyone accepts them as recommended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Vice President Taylor, second by Trustee Simon Holland. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Next up, 2.04, we have discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9052, Board of Trustees Governing Mission, to more specifically to clarify the policy and its purpose to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. Back over to you, Chief General Counsel.
I guess apparently somehow I was on mute and I couldn't figure out how to get off of it, so I apologize. Let's try this again. All right, good afternoon. President Raymond, Superintendent McNeil, Board of Trustees. This is Board Policy 9052. Again, similarly, we cleaned up the responsible office. We removed redundancies and unnecessary language. The purpose of this policy is to talk about communications, and we have a bunch of other things in there that probably that we feel doesn't fit. Some of this language is repeated in other areas, so we got rid of it. There's no reason to have it in here multiple times. Basically, we set out to what the policy is, rework this. Again, you can see our position of adding with students, families always coming first, the public, then the media. We just feel like that's the best way to handle these things. And then end each other. I'm not sure why we would have with staff or constituents. That's the public. And then staff, well, that's us. That's who we are, and it's each other. And I actually borrowed that language from this paragraph A that was already in there. So I thought that just sounded better. This is how we're going to act amongst ourselves. Just some cleanup through here. Felt that this was, for the most part, unnecessary, but was important to point out that the board does employ the chief auditor as well as the superintendent, so left that portion in. Then we talked about different communication structures down here, communication between trustees, so how you all communicate with each other, communication between trustees and staff, and visits to schools and other district facilities. Yeah, and I have to say, I will share, I did contemplate on whether or not that should be its own, but I do think it's part of communications. The more we talked about it, especially since the communication department assists with it, communication with your constituents and how that works for the board, and then other general protocols. I will point out that a lot of what we did was to clarify things, to remove what we felt was unnecessary. And oh, this one's important to us. You, at times, there was an attempt to, I won't say an attempt, but we were restricted as your lawyer in our ability to talk with you and you to us. And that's a violation of the model rules of professional conduct. I need to be able to go to you whenever I want. And so I cleaned this area up in here to make that more clear. Our communication between the trustees and the Office of the General Counsel, that law would supersede any policy we passed anyway. And then it's furthered in our own policy with regard to our office specifically. So I do have some changes by Trustee Simon Holland. I don't necessarily disagree with them, or I should say probably the better way is I agree with some of them, but I didn't feel it was my place to make those types of substantive changes. So what I did is I tried to restructure these things to be cleaner and more effective. I did make substantive changes with regard to our office because that does fit into my role as your Chief General Counsel. So that being said, that's all I have for Board Policy 9052, and let the games begin.
Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. So I have three things that I hoped we could discuss. So the first one is under 3A, communication between trustees and staff. And what's been added is that communication by trustees to other trustees should go through the Office of the Superintendent. And I just don't think that's appropriate. You know, we're duly elected, and I shouldn't be constrained to only communicate with other trustees through the Office of the Superintendent. So I would just back the other trustees out of it. I do think it's appropriate to communicate with staff and, you know, other public bodies through the Office of the Superintendent. So that's my first one, and welcome people's comments about that. And then I have two others. Do you want me to go through all three of them first, or you want to go one at a time?
Let's go through all three and then we can.
Okay. And then on 3C, let's see, 3C is about not communicating except during work hours. And I guess I'm just sensitive to those trustees who do work full time and may only be able to, and this doesn't say emails, it doesn't prohibit emails, but it does say calling or texting, that it can only be done during the work week. And I guess I'm sensitive to that. I think it's appropriate to not have answers until the work week. But I think there are times when folks do need to get an idea out who are working during the work week and don't have the flexibility to be able to do that. You know, they need to do it after hours sometimes. And then on 5A is communication with constituents. That every inquiry is to be referred to staff. And I guess I feel like if a trustee can answer a constituent question, you know, easily and accurately, they should continue to do so. And my feeling is sometimes it can undermine public confidence if the trustee always has to say, I'll get back to you after I talk to staff, and not be able to answer, you know, a complaint if they can answer it. I think it's also inefficient to have every inquiry go to someone else. So those are my three thoughts for discussion.
And then if I may just address those, and again, I don't disagree. I actually think, especially on 3A, I'll just point out, only because I want you guys to know, I didn't actually add that. If you read the way it used to be, it was by members of the board to staff or members. And I presume that meant other trustees. I thought it was poorly worded, so I rearranged it. I have no problem taking that out if that's what the board wants to do. And frankly, I think it should be taken out. To your point, as long as you follow the open meeting law, and you all know that very well, and we've done a great job on that. Why wouldn't you communicate with each other? But that's how it was reading before to me, because it says members of the board, and then it said or members. And so I'm like, and then it says or other public bodies. So what did this term members mean, if you will? See where I'm highlighting? So I took that as other trustees, and I was like, wow, I can't believe that's so. No issue there from legal's perspective. In fact, I think it's a good suggestion. And then on C, again, this was previous language. The only reason why it's underlined is I had moved it from another area, as well as 5A, same thing. It's only red line because it was moved from other policies, actually. This one was found in, I can't remember, a different policy. So I actually cut and pasted it over to this policy because it didn't make sense. You had a communication language in a whole different policy. I want to say it was in 9050. And I should have put that in the notes, and I apologize for that. And this one was also found in a different policy, and I had cut and pasted it over to here because it didn't make sense. Again, it was a policy about communication, or a paragraph about communication in a policy wholly unrelated. So if I'm a new trustee, let's just say Mr. Thigpen, who's coming on board, right? And I'm trying to learn the rules, and I don't know that there's these communication policies around, and I'm finding these paragraphs in different places. They were misplaced. So I put these over here. No ownership on behalf of anybody on staff. Just wanted to let you know how they got here. And I should have noted where I brought them over for. I didn't. I don't remember. So
that's okay. That's okay. And I appreciate that discussion. Back on 3C, which is the refrain from calling or texting. Maybe if we flipped it and made the second sentence first. So a trustee may send the superintendent email communication, outside of the work week, but a response will not be expected until the work week. And then I think your point is you can communicate outside the work week and not expect a response, but don't be calling or texting, because I know that was a really, really tough issue. And it certainly, when I was county manager, it was a terrible issue with one of the commissioners I had. But I think, rather than putting the you can't do this first, I would put the here's what you can do first, and then talk about the calling or texting.
And I'd like to suggest, I'm pushing for this throughout the district on texting. So I already made that flip, and let me know if the board's comfortable with that. I'd like to take out the word texting. I'm strongly, and the superintendent is on board, and we're encouraging folks to end texting and starting to use other sources. It's been creating a huge public records issue. Mm-hmm. And so I would prefer that we put refrain from calling or messaging, and then we can define or instant messaging, which is more undefined, as opposed to texting as a specific type of communication. I'm going to suggest that the district move towards Teams, which makes it go through our networking system so that phones do not become part of the public record system. And so I'd like to take that word out altogether, if the board would be comfortable with that, and maybe put in instant messaging or messaging.
I think I think that works to change that to messaging. If we do flip those, we have to put more context in the first sentence. A trustee may send the superintendent email communication outside, after the close of the workday or on weekends, recognizing that a response will not be expected any earlier, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm fine with that way.
Thank you, Trustee Simon Holland. I'll just quickly say that I don't have any, I think absolutely the change to 3A makes sense. My only question is what is a public body? Does that mean public body or committee of the board? I see committee is crossed out. So maybe that needs to be further expanded, or to say specifically staff or I'm not sure. Other
Yeah,
that
so
the committees of the board, or is that like, because I can reach out to a city council member or a commissioner without the superintendent.
mhm. So committees is not really defined in the law. There's no such thing as advisory committees and all of those things. They're all public bodies. So
Okay.
we call them committees and commissions and those things. And that's great because it does make more sense to the general public. But what, in my mind, I didn't want to put committees because we don't always have committees. We call them commissions,
Yeah.
Save Nutley Schools Commission. And so I just said other public bodies. We could put other district public bodies.
Okay.
And public bodies are specific. They have to be advisory to you. So that's a term in the law as opposed to a committee created by the superintendent, which doesn't report to you, right? So I think if we just put other district public bodies, it'll cover that. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I still sort of have a little bit of an issue with it just because I communicate directly with the appointee that I have occasionally, not all the time, but like for the zoning committee, my appointee for my district, I directly communicate with her occasionally. Not
Right.
giving her direction, but I just to check in.
Yeah, sure. No ownership here. If you want to take it out, I just reworded it to make it more sense, to make it make more sense under the law and statutes. If the board doesn't feel comfortable with that, please feel free to take it out. No, it kind of doesn't really fit in the section. It was already in there, but if you read what the section's about, it's about communication between trustees and staff.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, you all appoint people to zoning, for example, you should be able to communicate with your folks on zoning. You shouldn't use undue influence on them, but you should be able to talk to them, make sure they're getting what they need, or even to share thoughts. That's fine.
I think to me that one is about staff. So I would almost prefer if we just took out all of it except for staff. So method of communication by trustees to staff is through the office of the superintendent or board services department.
Like that?
Yeah, we do have to add an or between office of the superintendent or board services department.
Okay.
That's a little thing.
No,
3C.
let's do it right.
I like the change to 3C. I like it the way we landed on it with the just flipping it. I think that works. And then no issues with 5A. I didn't, with the change you suggested, Trustee Simon Holland, I didn't read it that way. I read it more loosely about issues, that I would need help with, not, I guess, each inquiry. I wasn't reading it as every inquiry. I was reading it as each inquiry that needed help in my mind. That's how I, so I think being more clear there is a good idea.
And I'm sorry, what changes do we want to make here to 5A? I don't think I added anything.
No, I don't have the exact, I think what I heard Trustee Simon Holland saying was the concern around the, on the fourth line down, each inquiry there makes it seem like every inquiry would have to go, when sometimes we can answer them ourselves, or I don't want to repeat everything that you said, Trustee Simon Holland. Go ahead.
I just as a suggestion, I take out the first sentence because for constituents, the board is the first stop quite often, and we want to be responsive. But I would say maybe as applicable, trustees agree to contact the appropriate person, and just leave it at that. As applicable, trustees agree to contact the appropriate person. So, if I need help, I'm gonna contact the appropriate person, and I'm not gonna. I don't know about the insist that constituents do so as well, but I would just take out the second sentence.
period
Vice
there.
President.
Take this out here and here.
That's my suggestion. Oops, I have to let the dog out. Just 1 second.
I'll just leave it like that until we hear from other trustees.
Vice President Taylor and Trustee Cottle, do you have comments on the suggestions from Trustee Simon Holland, or do you have new additions? No.
Mine are about Trustee Simon Holland's changes.
Okay, go ahead, Vice President Taylor.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. You already flagged 3A in terms of other public bodies, and that's removed. That I think that would sometimes we run into other public officials, and we're able to, get some things done, quite frankly, sometimes. And we don't want that communication to have to go through the superintendent. I do think it's important when that happens and that we notify the superintendent's office. I think that's important. Hey, I ran into so-and-so and she's asking me about this or something, especially if it's something I can take care of myself, bam. But if it's something related to the district, I do think that it's important that the superintendent's office is notified. And I don't know if that's what this was getting at. But certainly the communication shouldn't have to go through, because those are our peers, and other elected bodies. So do we want to say something along the lines? I like the changes that you suggested, both of you suggested, Madam President and Trustee Simon Holland. Do we want to include in here, if that happens, then the superintendent's office should be notified? I do think that's important, because we don't want her caught off guard, or Lindsay, should something like that come up, because they're always out talking to people too. That's one comment. The comment I had I'm good with 3C, and I like the changes. So the comments I had on that, I don't need anymore. On 5A, I'm sorry, Neil, I'm jumping.
That's okay. I'm catching up.
I'm waiting. There we go. All right, on 5A, where it says insist, and you mentioned this just now, Trustee Simon Holland. This may be the place, because we're going to have a lot of new trustees. Hopefully not 4, but we will have a lot of new trustees. 2 or 3 of them. Do we want to say that we encourage constituents, and that we should encourage trustees? We should encourage constituents to reach out. We've been having this conversation before, and so if someone asked me something about something going on at one of my schools, School A, Lemelson, they ask me, and then I send it to Kristen and say, hey, help me. When maybe the thing for me to do is to ask them to go to their principal at Lemelson, or their teacher at Lemelson, or if they've done that to the area superintendent who has Lemelson, or something like that. Maybe we want to encourage, because we kind of got away from that. And so it's a good reminder to have it, hey, let's encourage them to go. And I don't know it's going to be somebody, but so maybe appropriate staff member, it might be a good place to say, hey, we encourage them to do that. Just so that it's a reminder, and then the new trustees get taught that immediately as they come in. Those are my comments.
Superintendent McNeil, do you have any thoughts on that? It does.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it's in alignment with the other section, and I think it was 3C, I think, as far as with staff. I think this will do it. I think that will be fine. I did, and I talked to Neil about this, so he knows I'm going to say this. So up at 3C, as far as when to contact the superintendent over the weekend or late at night, I guess as a CEO of a multi-million-dollar organization, I think that's just an expectation of a CEO to be on call 24/7. I absolutely respect the trustees' input on that, and I feel as the superintendent that if a trustee needs to get a hold of the superintendent, and I'm not just thinking about, I'm thinking about future superintendents. I just think that's an expectation for a CEO. And also the protection of the staff that a trustee would contact the superintendent and not put that on staff members over the weekend or late at night. But to me, that's That's just part of being a CEO. I absolutely respect, you know, what the trustees are saying. So that's just my input.
Okay.
So do we want to look at, so I tried to clean up 5A based off of what I understand Trustee Taylor and Trustee Simon Holland's comments to be. I think this is still in debate, but I put as applicable, trustees agree. So what I think as applicable means is if it's an answer that you can give in 10 seconds and you know off the top of your head, you're not applying this. But if you don't know the answer, then you're going to contact you as trustees agree to either contact the appropriate person in the district or encourage I think this was Trustee Taylor's, encourage the constituent to reach out to the appropriate person. So I rewrote it that way. And then, so I still don't know if we want this last sentence. And so I don't know where we're at on that. And then
Go ahead.
What's that?
I just wondered if you wanted to resolve that before we move on to something else.
And then we can go back up to the 3C that the superintendent just brought up.
Does anyone have any with their hand raised? Trustee Simon Holland.
I think, thank you, Madam President. I think as it's been reworded, and I definitely appreciate the input from my colleagues, especially Vice President Taylor. I think with the rewrite that you've done, Neil, that next sentence is not necessary now.
I agree.
So we could just take that out. If that works for other people.
That works for me. Thank you. Let me lower my hand. Sorry.
Okay. And I'm good with that. Anyone else thoughts on 5A?
Okay.
Okay. Then we can move back up to 3C. This is just a bit more, I think, in a way of a philosophical debate. You know, I think the current board probably all are sensitive to doing our best not to bombard you over the weekend and after hours with questions and you know, save those for work day, you know, times, even though I am an, you know, trustee that is busy during the workday. You know, the evenings are equally busy for me. So when I do have time, it's often very early in the morning or very late at night. So it has not been as much of a concern for me to address. You know, this is not something I feel as strongly about, I guess I should say. So does any Trustee Cottle or Trustee Kennedy, your hands up, do either of you have any thoughts on 3C? Nope.
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Trustee Kennedy, and then Vice President Taylor.
Thank you, Superintendent McNeil, because I agree, but I think that we have the wording in there where we're saying unless compelling urgency or unless imminent threat. I do like acknowledging that people are entitled to a life, but I would hope that somehow when we read it, we understand that yes, if there is something that is urgent, if there is something that is a matter of real importance, that people would still reach out. I would just hope that the last sentence doesn't lead someone to believe that they're precluded. I'm almost afraid that it kind of undoes the unlesses that occurred before. And because I agree with Superintendent McNeil. I mean, and she understands it was that same way as a principal. I expected that if it was something important, I would be awakened it too. And it's okay.
That's a very good point, Trustee Kennedy. And I think maybe that last sentence, now that I read it, doesn't need to be in there. And I also think it does leave the door open if someone were to email you, Superintendent McNeil, you could respond and say, let's talk. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't have the time to deal with, set up the time to call or text or message. But Vice President Taylor, you had your actual hand raised earlier. Did you want to add something to 5C? And then, oh, Neil, do I see your hand raised? Okay, Vice President, I don't know who to go first.
I'll put my actual hand down. Yeah, because I thought we were just jumping in before we moved on, so I apologize if I'm out of order, Madam President. Thank you. I was going to put back on my my work when it's not COVID hat during this. It's a little different now because it's COVID, so I'm home a lot more. But when my work is as my work, when it typically gets and I'm traveling, I have to admit I am a violator of this in that one, I'm a violator of this, let me say that. But in that when there's something that comes up or whatever, I'm because I'm working and this is the only time in my day I'm gonna have to turn my attention towards the Washoe County School District. So I'm turning my attention to it, I'm doing what I'm doing and so on. The majority of that is on email, but there are times when I'll send Kristen a text. And I don't necessarily, and I know we're getting away from text, so a message, whatever that may mean, council. And I'm thinking of people that we have, like Kirk Dickman, for an example, he works, and whomever else might get elected, and other boards, it's not just for us. I do want to be sensitive because if I'm traveling a lot, I don't want to feel like, well, geez, I can't do something. I don't want staff to think that, I mean, I don't email it, text anybody else anyway. I don't want them to feel like they have to respond whenever I get something. Although every time I tell Kristen don't respond because it's a weekend, but I have this thing I have to do right now, and she responds anyway. Even though I'm often don't respond, I just have this is happening right now, and I have to get this out right now, but don't respond. She always does. So I don't know. I like to, maybe if it's a whenever possible, if at all, maybe a little bit of room in there so that if it's that situation and it's like, look, I'm on this plane or whatever the case may be, we don't lose that. Not just me, but other board members that work, because during the work day, I'm working. And I don't want to be insensitive to that because I'm so used to working from home right now.
Thank you, Vice President Taylor. Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm also sensitive to that. I think in the first sentence, we're covered because it's just saying we're not going to expect an answer, but the superintendent can certainly give one. In the second sentence, perhaps we could say, rather than trustees will refrain, we could soften it a little bit and say trustees are encouraged to refrain from calling or messaging. Because I do think there are going to be times, and it's not an imminent threat. You just have to take advantage of that time, as Angie said, when you have it. And because we're all part-time, that's going to happen for people. So maybe just soften it a little bit. Or, okay, there you go.
Should we get rid of this then? The part that I had.
Yeah, I don't know. And I'd rather put it, I think we could leave it there, but I think we could state it in the positive instead. Trustees are encouraged to refrain from calling is softer for me than discouraged from. Maybe that's just me, but I appreciate what Vice President Taylor is saying, because I know it's hard for some folks.
Okay.
And would you change or to and, because that aligns with the protocol as far as, for example, if a trustee were to email Pete or somebody else in area soup, that you would include the soup? So messaging the superintendent and staff after the close of the workday and or weekend?
I'm not sensitive to what the what the intent of that would be and how it would change it personally.
We can email, but we're talking about not direct messaging. I mean,
Yeah.
not texting or whatever we come up with. Is that what we're talking about on that?
Yeah,
I'm just
calling
saying,
or messaging.
yeah, just to keep the soup in the loop is because there's another one and I can't remember where it was, but trustees are encouraged to refrain from calling or messaging the superintendent and staff after the close of the workday or on weekends. Or
What you're concerned about there is making sure that the superintendent is copied, and I think that's a issue that does need to be in here. I'm not sure where it goes.
Yeah, because that's not what that's saying. What that's just saying is they can't copy the superintendent or contact, excuse me, the superintendent or staff during that time. We could add a section, communication between trustees and superintendent.
I thought you already had that though. I thought we already.
I thought it was somewhere else too, and it's escaping me now.
I know you had it in there. I remember reading it.
Yeah, it might be in one of the other policies. I could look here. So if I open up another policy, you guys still see the old policy, correct?
Yeah.
The 9052. See, I'm looking on my screen at 9055. Man, I just don't remember now.
I know I thought we talked about it today.
We did.
Well, there's 2, which is communication between trustees, each other. 3,
Right.
which is communication between trustees and staff, which includes really is the superintendent with, some confirmation around how to go through the superintendent to speak with staff. Did I say 3?
That's where it is.
Yeah.
It's 3. Yeah.
Is between the trustees and staff. 4 is trustees and office of the general counsel. Where did it go? No, that's a sub of 3.
That's a sub of 3, correct? Right.
4 is where did
Visits.
the one with constituents go?
Yeah. 4 is the one of visits to schools and other district facilities.
5 is communication with constituents.
Mm-hmm.
And then to go back to Vice President Taylor's comment earlier about when you're communicating with other elected officials or, kind of business on behalf of the district, that would sort of live somewhere else in my mind. It wouldn't necessarily go in 3 or 5. And so I don't know if there should be a new number for that, where if we were, and I'm sorry, I'm going off on a new kind of topic here, but it was relevant to the point that Vice President Taylor made about 3A and the public bodies, which we removed because that really is just about staff. Do we need to have guidance in this policy around trustee communication with, other, it wouldn't even have to be limited to elected officials, but, that sort of communication where it is vital to include the superintendent, that example that Vice President Taylor gave. So.
Yeah, I think that's handled down here in general protocols where it talks about.
Oh, okay.
It talks about down here how you can have interactions at social affairs and other functions. You can welcome input from others, and I don't it seems really getting into the weeds if we're going to control trustees and say what they can and can't do with other public bodies. They should be allowed to do that. It goes to, I think, Trustee Simon Holland's point earlier about, hey, if I want to talk to this person, I'm duly elected, I can go talk to this person. I think the purpose of this communication protocol, and again, keep in mind it comes out of the board governance rules created by Dr. Osbury, our model, is to make sure that the superintendent is looped in when her employees are being contacted by the board. That's only fair, which I think this policy does manage that well enough, right? Because you're supposed to communicate with them through her office. And so that's what all of this is saying in 3. We're an exception to that because of rules related to the law. And then what we're also trying to manage here is visit to schools, because that does create an issue for school sites. What if they're testing, for example, and those type of things. So these are to address communication protocols that we want to control within the district. Your discussions with the city council, that's up to you. And if you're there representing the district as, let's say it's a legislative matter, then that's managed down here at the bottom too, when it talks about legislative matters. If a trustee testifies before any public body or legislative body on behalf of the district. So you can see that at E. I just feel like if we need to, policies are supposed to be high level. These are the things that we want to manage. And if we start getting into the weeds about what you can and how you're going to email or discuss things with city council members or county commissioners, that would not be, in my opinion, the best way to do it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think I did, and maybe Vice President Taylor just got tripped up on that 3A about the inclusion of public bodies. So I'm good with it the way it is. And I think those changes are that we have made to 3A, 3C, and 5A are good for me right now. Trustee Minetto, your hand is up. Did you have comment on any of those 3 items?
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to make sure that it's okay on the weekend to send an email not expecting a response, correct? Because that, my mind's always, well, just like Vice President Taylor, if I'm thinking about it now, I can write it down, I'll lose the piece of paper. I never expect a response on the weekend. Sometimes I get them, but I think I'm thinking about it now, do it now. So that's okay, according to what we have here.
Yeah, I think in my mind, from what I've heard from every trustee, 3C now covers all of our wishes and desires.
Oh, I like that. Thank you.
Everybody good with that one? Okay. Thank you for being so patient, Trustee Cottle.
Thank you. I just have 2. 3B. It talks about our communication with the Office of General Counsel. The sentence that reads, "Such a decision is at the discretion of the Chief General Counsel, trustees, or the board." Is that decision would be to have the Chief General Counsel, assuming reaching out to the board directly. I would like to propose that we remove the word trustees and add board president. Because really an individual trustee can make a request for something, but generally that would go to the board president anyway. The Chief General Counsel has the authority to contact the board directly. And if the board directs it, the board can direct superintendent on something. But it seems appropriate to remove trustees, which would be the board anyway as a collective whole, and insert board president. And I think about 2019, and I know that former President Simon Holland would, work with Chief General Counsel, and then from that point, the board would be informed. So that's what I recommend on 3B. And then my last one is on 4B. Last year, I believe, in fall 19, as a board, we were told about some of the resource challenges in board services and just servicing all of us. And it was recommended that if we can set up our own school visits with principals, for example, to go ahead and do that and then just let board services know we made a school visit as an example. So I'm wondering if we want to create some flexibility in 4B, because that's what I've been doing, because I know Jen actually prefers that if I can to set my own visit up, and then just let her know versus telling her to set up everything. So I don't know if we need to create some flexibility that we make sure we follow rules as in, you know, contact the principal. If it's a bad day, then, you know, we respect that. But I know it's a delicate balance. Do we want to make sure we don't bombard schools? However, I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. So those would be my two. I don't necessarily have a recommendation for 4B, more of a, maybe we make it a little more flexible to respect that we have been told that, you know, board services is a little stretched.
Maybe it could read instead of through the superintendent, board services, that it would be in consultation with the superintendent.
That's what I was going to suggest.
I think that's a good point, and I think, you know, I referenced earlier, shortly after Trustee Kennedy came on board, that in a conversation with, I think, Superintendent McNeil, that especially in your case, Trustee Kennedy, knowing the relationships you have with all of these principals, it would be sort of weird if they received a message from board services setting up that visit when you could very easily just communicate directly with them. But I think the in consultation allows for, and you know, leaves it so that we would have that kind of back and forth with board services, so that it's not a surprise visit and all that. So I'm good with that. Trustee Kennedy and Trustee Minetto, I see your hand is up.
Well, for the record, Jen has set up all my visits since then. Well, and because I actually flipped it and said that rather than just making a personal contact, yeah, I am visiting now as a trustee, and I found that it's worked very well. But having the option, because no offense, probably with the incline schools, yeah, it's probably going to be direct. But it's worked out very well. But knowing that there's an option and that having a process in place, I think makes a big difference. So thanks.
Nope, that makes a lot of sense. Trustee Minetto.
Thank you, Madam President. I've always done it through the schools, mostly because I haven't had a lot of success with trying to call the school and setting things up. And trustees are somehow viewed as the boss. And, you know, then I worry about the principals thinking, well, we got to do this. And I don't know if they do, I don't know. And I don't want to make more work for the staff, but boy, have they been marvelous for me. I've got like 2 more schools to visit this semester. Yeah, I really haven't had much success calling the principal and trying to set something up. I haven't had a lot of response. It's like, I've even had one person say, well, we don't do it this way. I said, okay, I'll let somebody know I'm coming. And then, you know, but yeah, I don't know. Thank you.
Okay, so that's good on B. Do we want to go back up to the general counsel one?
Vice President Taylor or Superintendent McNeil, did you have anything to add to that previous item?
Just for the visit one, all I was saying or going to say is it's important for your metric too, for the board's metric, that that's the only reason. I mean, I love it when our trustees visit, and I think it's, you know, to your point, Trustee Minetto, I think it's a combination of our principals do, and our schools love it when the trustees, and I know that trustees hopefully would be, you know, it's testing, it's parent conferences. I mean, you all know what's going on in the district, and when a good day to visit, but it is helpful and it's important for board services to track that because that's part of your metric as far as the metric as far as visiting schools.
Does in consultation with capture that for you? Okay.
Yeah, that's all I was, I think that's good. Perfect.
And Vice President Taylor, is your hand up about that? You're on mute.
All right, there we go. I was just going to concur with Trustee Minetto. It's helpful. I mean, there are times when I do it on my own. It's more helpful when I have it from board services, just because sometimes it's a really busy time for me to manage and track and respond, and Jen's super bothered whenever I've asked for her help. So I've actually I don't want to say a hybrid model, but I kind of do a hybrid. And I think again, it's just that's especially when I'm really busy at work. Otherwise, what happens is I just fall really behind on getting my visits in, and the best part of the job, no offense, I love you guys to death, but the best part of the job is when you get to visit with your schools, man. And so I like to make sure I get to everybody at least once. So it's just helpful to have that option. So I do agree we should leave that in. It's helpful for me as a working trustee.
Okay. I think then are we good with that one? We'll move back to B. Was it B, just B, B1? I can't see my.
Yeah, B, I don't know what it would be. I don't know how it's numbering itself. It'll figure it out. I think it's actually just going to be one paragraph.
Okay.
So I changed it to read the law may require the office of the general counsel to communicate directly with the board. Let me put this, the appropriate board officer, and I'll explain why I'm doing it that way, or trustees individually. Such a decision at the discretion of the chief general counsel, board president, appropriate board officer of the board, because the issue may be with the board president. And so it really, frankly, whatever we write in here doesn't matter to me, but it matters to how you communicate to me, because I'll follow the statute that says I can talk to who I need to, because that's what I was trying to capture here. But really it's this gives you the discretion to come to me. And I do like the idea of taking out individual trustees. When I first got here, individual trustees, no one on this board, but would rely on me for advice that wasn't always, or tried to come to me for advice that wasn't always district related and things of that nature. And I would be put in odd situations. So that's what I'm trying to avoid here. So this is, if we have a district issue and like we did last year, I would be able to go to the board president. Let's just say it involved the board president and the superintendent, then I would have to be able to go to the vice president or the clerk or whomever. So this seems to fit well.
I'm good with that. Trustee Cottle? Okay, I see thumbs up. Trustee Minetto, your hand is up. Are you? Nope. Okay. Any other edits or thoughts on 9052? So it would be looking for a motion to forward board policy 9052 with the recommendations made to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees. Recommended changes made, sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Simon Holland, second by Trustee Kennedy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. All right. 2.0, oh, my screen froze. Sorry, it's reloading.
9055, I believe we are on.
My board docs froze, so I have to reopen it. Okay. Agenda item 2.05, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9055 officers and duties of the Board of Trustees, more specifically to clarify the policy and its purpose to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. Go back to you, Chief General Counsel.
Great. Thank you very much, President Raymond, Superintendent McNeil, members of the board. Here we are again, Board Policy 9055, Officers and Duties of the Board of Trustees. Similar to before, just cleaning up some language, making it a little more specific in the purpose statement. The policy, we felt that this was already in 9052. I didn't really understand what this sentence was saying at all, so I just deleted it. If I didn't understand it, I figured most people probably didn't. But who knows? And so I felt that this was already stated in other policies, 9052 and 9050, or at least I believe. I'm not a big fan of her, him. I just think we used the title, which is the president. So we took that out. Deleted this because I was concerned with an open meeting law violation. We manage outside counsel for you as part of Board Policy 9165. So this was a conflict with that policy. Just to point out our ethical rules under the Model Rules of Professional Conduct, we understand that if there was outside counsel hired, and let's say it was an issue with a different client representative, we understand the discretion of what is shared and what is not shared, and we're required to avoid violating that by law. So it's not as if that's just more of a management tool. And the reason why I would like to have that removed is in the past when we had outside counsel, when I first got here, that outside counsel was often put on tasks that it exceeded his contract by individual trustees, and I don't think that's appropriate or what should happen. And that's why I'm recommending that removal. Board policies 90, that's just a cleanup. We don't need to put titles in. I didn't really understand. I didn't think this was necessary. Why would we require going to this external evaluation for somebody licensed in balanced governance model? That seemed like a protectionist language to further the balanced governance model. And I don't think that's our place. You guys might choose to go with somebody else you want for that. Going down, just minor changes. So here's some more substantive changes. This really what I did here is I just took the language, if you can see the mouse from here, and moved it up here. I didn't think it needed to be on its own paragraph, but otherwise that's all I have on 9055. And I know that Trustee Simon Holland sent some recommendations earlier about 1230. So we could talk about those, or I'll throw it back to the president.
Okay, Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a couple of things. 1B, little 3, which has the annual schedule for board topics by, the president is responsible for approving, it's on page 2, for approving the annual activities calendar and the annual schedule for board topics. We haven't done that in 4 years I've been here that I know of. So I was suggesting that we delete that because it's just unreasonable that we would be having a schedule of topics by May because things change too fast. That would be one suggestion. I have, let's see, 1B, little 9, IX, in the absence of the clerk and the vice president, the president may appoint another board member to assume the clerk's duties. I was just curious why there wouldn't be someone appointed to assume the vice president's duties as well. So that was another one that I would suggest.
So I can address that quickly if you want. There's no requirement that we have a vice president by law. There is a requirement that we have a clerk by law. So the only two officers found in the law that must attend a meeting are the president and the clerk. So you have to have somebody take the clerk duties on, but you don't have to have somebody do the vice president duties. So I think that's why that is that way. I don't have a problem if you want to change it, but I'm just
well, so I was just then take out and the vice president. In the absence of the clerk, the president may appoint another board member to assume the clerk's duties.
That makes sense to me.
That would be my suggestion there.
I wish I would have caught that. That was a good one.
You caught plenty, my friend. On 1G, again, I'm hugely supportive of the board self-assessment. It's not a change to the language there. I'm just responding to Andrew's question. You know, we haven't done it. I think it's probably too late to do it for this board, but I just wanted to say I'm a huge supporter of it, and it's been a very, very good process. So I don't have any language change there. And then way over on 5F, which is page 6, it says the board serves to initiate and request new policy and policy revision. I guess the reason you're deleting and request there is just that initiate takes care of and request, because we obviously want the board to be able to request new policies and policy revision.
That's exactly why, and I would just also point out that we specifically wrote into board policy 9070 that the board policy committee can request, and so can the board can request new policies. So it's that's what initiation is. So it's written out in multiple spots. That's the only reason why I took it out.
Okay. Could we? Let's see. I guess we do make it an action of the entire board to initiate new policies. It's not a board member can't request a new policy. The board has to do that. Correct?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then I would we would change 1BIX to take out in the absence of, and the vice president. And then I'm suggesting that we take out that requirement in 1B(3) that the president is responsible for approving an annual schedule of board topics by May.
And if I may, Madam President, just on that 1B(3), I left it in. I agree. I don't think I've ever seen it done since I've been here, and I'm on my 5th year. And but I left it in because it was in there, and that's one of those things that I don't know. I didn't feel comfortable taking it out on my own, but I have no issue with it from our perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Vice President Taylor, I see your hand waving. Do you have comments or questions about those items that were just mentioned? Your mute button's on.
All right, you can't read lips yet? I have a comment. I just want to address, answer the question that's come up. We would have an annual, and it usually would come out in May or June, and it would be a list of all the board stuff. I had all these little squares, had all the months on the calendar, and it would have budget work session, it would have board meetings, it would have the budget public meeting, it would have all of that. And that was actually reviewed at the when we have the BLT meetings, right? The board leadership meetings, and that would happen. And so I believe that's what that was referring to. We haven't had one in a couple of years, but I believe that's what I think that's what that document was.
May I, Madam President?
Yep.
I think having a calendar is good procedurally. And we have had that, and I recall that as well, that, this happens in January and this happens in February. But I think that's different, that's more of an administrative function, having a calendar of things that have to happen. I would still take this out because it's not really topics. Anyway.
No, I'm good with it. I just wanted to answer what I think. I just wanted to provide what I think the answer was to that.
Ben's holding it up.
I'm sorry. Oh yeah, that, yes.
Yeah.
Kristen, that's it. It used to have colors on it. So I'm fine with taking it out again. Like I said, I just wanted to provide at least what I thought it was. Then also on 1G, I think it was 1G, Trustee Simon Holland mentioned the G.
Yeah, the board self-assessment is in G, yeah.
Okay, now I can't find it. E.
It's on page 3.
Oh, I'm way down, that's why.
It's
Yep,
on
got
page 3, and I'm a huge fan of doing that.
And yeah, thank you. So on 1G, I'm trying to remember what, because we did have conversation about board governance, and so, and I think part of the idea behind that was if we get into training in another model, then the waters begin to get muddy. Much like we went to the training in Carson City, for an example. If that group, and you can certainly speak for that being a good training, but some of those things are really in direct conflict with the balanced governance model, which is what we use. And if we start doing self-assessment in an area that isn't in alignment, it's going to really kind of muddy things up a little bit. So what I would advocate for, but at the same time, I know we don't want to tie people's hands and so on. And I think that the board can certainly decide that we want our governance model to be something different, right? At any time, the board can say that. But since this is written in balanced governance, maybe we want to say encouraged or something like that. Maybe not required, but I would hate to take it out completely, because then we could run into some of that kind of contradicts each other, and we're evaluating ourselves on something that's not necessarily in alignment with how all of our policies have been written in this 9,000 series.
Well, I would suggest though that the sentence above it says that you will measure yourselves on balanced governance model standards. It just, why be so specific that only external evaluators would be trained and licensed in the balanced governance model? That was my concern. I don't, but you are saying we're going to evaluate ourselves on balanced governance models, so I think it's in there. Does that mean?
Yeah, I wanted that to be covered. I would still like it to say that it's encouraged, for that, to encourage people to do that. But and that way you have kind of some but I'll go with the board. I mean, the key part of it is in there, that we don't start evaluating ourselves on a model that's not in alignment with the one that we're governing ourselves on. And I do think that's in there. Like I said, I feel better if we left it in there, not with a mandate, but with just an encouragement. But if that's not the flavor, the preference of the board, that's okay. I'll go with it. Those are my comments on those recommendations from Trustee Simon Holland, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Taylor. Trustee Simon Holland, did you have a follow-up to the comments?
Well, I was just, thank you, Madam President. I was just going to say, we have adopted balanced governance model throughout these policies. So as long as they're everywhere in the policies, I think we should be evaluating ourselves based on balanced governance model standards. If we want to use something different, then we should, we should change, or future boards can change what the basis for effective governance standards are, and then have an assessment based on that. But as long as our policies are, here's what the governance standards are, I think it's good the way it is, and I agree with taking out the last sentence.
Okay, I think then if everyone's good with those recommendations, I see your point, Vice President Taylor, about what I'm hearing is that it's more about the trained and licensed in balanced governance instead of and recommending that. Is that what your suggestion was? A recommendation to, have the evaluation be provided by a trained and licensed balanced government model person?
Yeah, I guess what my recommendation would be, that we don't mandate it, because the way it's written right now, it's mandated. Yeah. But that we do encourage it, again, for future boards. But if that's not the preference of the board, that's fine. I mean, the the key meat of it is there. So I can go with the majority.
It would, to me, as a trustee and the president who is supposed to be helping to make sure that this happens, it would be hard for me to figure out how you would do annual self-assessment on balanced governance without bringing an outside person to facilitate it, because I don't know, I think first of all, that third party part, so it may be superfluous because you're not going to do a balanced governance evaluation without somebody coming in to help you, but I understand your point.
There are people out there that say they can do a whole lot of stuff they can't do.
Yeah, that's true.
As a consultant,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure, I can do that, and that might be that lens through which I'm looking, right? And I can save you $2,000. So that might be the lens through which I'm looking on this, but again, I'm not gonna lay on the sword for it.
Okay. Trustee Kennedy, did you have your hand up related to this item? I can unmute you. No, I can't.
All right, can you hear me now? Because
Yes.
this whole computer wanted to shut down. I like Neil's note related to this, and I agree. The one thing that I would say, and I'm going to go back to my previous experience with Washoe County School District, is that I do believe that board members can become informed, board members can be knowledgeable about balanced governance and what that means, and that there can be equitable and fair evaluation, self-evaluation, as well as even if the group has a conversation. But I do believe that it's possible to do it with people being informed and becoming knowledgeable themselves. And it would seem to me, being here all of a couple of weeks, that at this point, yeah, it is something that you should be knowledgeable about.
All right. I think that's great. And I think we're ready to move on from that one. So if everyone's good with that, Trustee Cottle.
Thank you, Madam President. So I have a couple fairly minor items. 1B7.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, so we don't currently do this. The president doesn't appoint trustees to committees. We, at the first meeting in January, decide as a board and take votes. Maybe the president should have the authority to do so if the need arises, but we don't actually put members on committees by this process in this 1B7 or what is now 6.
I think the president does make the appointment, but it is voted on. So I guess there's that, but it has always been done, at least in my time, in a very democratic, diplomatic way where it's very, it goes both ways, a request and a, but I think the way it is written, and the board president could just make all the decisions without consulting individual trustees. Angie or Katie, any memory on that?
Well, I agree that we do confirm it. So I think it is good for the president to make those recommendations, because often when you have two trustees that want to do the same thing, it's better if it doesn't come down to just a vote between board members. I think it's good for us to have the board or the board president appointing people to committees, I think what we could add is that the president has the responsibility with confirmation by the board to appoint board members to board committees. Maybe say it that way, because I appreciate what you're saying, Trustee Cottle, and I know it works much better if it is a mutual agreement. It's just sometimes there are, maybe there's 3 board members that want to serve on NIAA, for example. We do want the president to be able to make the recommendation and then have it confirmed by the board potentially. That would be one thought.
Okay.
Are we interested in adding that in then? And I'll say,
I think that's a good suggestion. It's more representative of the actual process.
And then I'll let you finish, Neil.
thanks. Sound good?
Yeah. And then
Okay.
1C, this the whole section. It seems very specific, and it may be worth just kind of condensing it into referencing the strategic plan. I guess that's the first thing I thought of. I mean, we can leave it. I really don't have a preference either way, but it just seemed very specific, where it might leave things out that are points of emphasis in their strategic plan. So I don't know what people think about that, but all of 1C, there's 4 then points under it. So I don't know what people think about that.
Trustee Simon Holland?
I think it would be good to leave those in. It doesn't mean that we would have only those things. It just says it should include it. But there is a lot of research that shows that that school district performance is better when the trustees are taking the time to consider those things publicly. And so I think it's good to have it in policy that, and not just say, shall regularly report on the strategic plan. But these are important things that the board is accountable for, and they should be reported publicly on a routine basis. And we know that boards that do that have better schools. So that would be my thought.
And I'm good with that. It wasn't really something that I was really passionate about. Just thought I'd bring it up. My third one is 3C. 3C to me looks like a contradiction of a conversation we just had about the clerk. It reads to me that if the clerk isn't there, it can be assigned to just anybody, where we just talked about the board president picks a board member. And so it really shouldn't go to a staff member or an employee. It should just be a board, the president will just appoint a board member. So 3C seems to be not needed, I guess, to me. Speaking as the clerk, I don't even know what that means, that if I'm not there, president just picks somebody, when it just go to a board member. So I don't know why that would be there. That works. And then my last one is 4A and then little 3. I would just recommend that we change it to the employment decisions. Evaluate or take out hire and replace it with employment decisions.
And employment decisions related to the superintendent, is that what you mean?
Yeah,
or
yeah, because the board can go the other way on that.
Well, I'll put it in and then you guys let me know if you want me to take it out.
evaluate would be included under employment decisions, or we got it? Okay,
I think it would be.
that would be everything for me.
Trustee Simon Holland.
I guess the one thing I'd say on that, if I may, Madam President, I'm sorry to interrupt, is the statute does specifically say that the trustees do evaluate the superintendent. So I think employment decisions still encompass it in my mind.
Madam President, I would just, as a suggestion, say employ and evaluate the superintendent, because a decision not to employ is a decision about employ. So rather than saying employment decisions related to, just a decision not to hire is within the responsibility of the board. So we don't need to say hire or not hire and evaluate. I would, I think, and I do want to call out evaluate specifically. So I would just say employ and evaluate the superintendent.
Okay. So I'm going to do this. So we have two different theories. One is employ and evaluate the superintendent, or employment decisions related to the superintendent. Just so you can see the differences.
Okay. Superintendent McNeil and then Trustee Calvert.
I'll wait till this discussion is over. But
Oh, okay.
I'm going back to C as far as progress reporting. I'll wait.
Trustee Calvert, did you have a comment on this item? You're on mute if you're talking.
I'm sorry, thank you. I just wanted Neil to kind of maybe go over a little bit the differences between what we're asking, the employment decision, and employ and evaluate.
In my mind, the difference would be employment decisions is broader, whereas employ and evaluate are specific. I will say, the more I think about it, is employ and evaluate are specific in the statutes related to the trustees' decision-making towards the superintendent. So that, I'm guessing that's how that language got in here, that this is original language that I left, didn't think it was necessary to change. I thought, so I'm just guessing that that's how it got in there, but those are the differences between the two. So employment decisions would be broader, whereas employ and evaluate is more specific, but it is what is in law.
Okay, so I guess that's what I'm saying as well. And my understanding is that we are to employ and evaluate, and I don't understand. And maybe one of the other trustees can weigh in on that, or you can, Neil, the employment decision part of it.
Yeah, I think it's up to the trustees. I don't want to pick between.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So,
I'll pick. I would prefer to leave in the evaluate part, so I think I would go with employ and evaluate. I totally understand that employment decisions covers it all, but I think it's important to include evaluate.
Sure.
Vice President Taylor.
I say the same. In particular, I mean, especially because it's statutory. So we make sure we cover what's statutory and is really specific on what we do. And I think if we say employ, I think we can extrapolate from there the decisions that come along with employ or not to employ or change employment status or whatever the case may be. So.
Okay. So I think that was 4. So I think we're good with this one. Not that we've taken official action, but that's where the board's leaning.
Okay, and Superintendent McNeil, your hand was raised in regards to which item?
Yes, so C, to ensure the delivery, it goes back to Trustee Cottle's. Let's
see under what number?
Sorry, that right there.
Okay.
Yep, that's C. So I believe, oops, can you scroll back down? There you go. I believe this actually happened way back when I was like a newbie chief of staff. So I'm wondering if the board would be amenable to ensure the delivery of board progress reporting to the public by the superintendent to include 1, 2, 3, 4. Because we report to you, what I'm saying is we don't just submit one progress report. We should be monitoring and progress reporting on a consistent basis. So we just submitted the strategic plan, the bridge strategic plan, and you had a whole reporting timeline on there. It's not just one progress report, it's multiple progress reports on all of these, whether it's disaggregated student data, whether it's budget and finance, whether it's around district initiatives and programs. It's not just one report. So I just wanted to highlight that. It's not a substantive change, but I just didn't want the trustees, especially our new trustees, to think that there's going to be one annual report with all of these metrics in it.
It seems to me that this should read to ensure the delivery of progress reports to the board, which is how it gets to the public, right? Because you're doing it in an open public meeting. You have to. And that seems to make more sense with what you just said, Superintendent McNeil.
I like that change. I was sort of thinking that because it to me was reading like,
yeah,
it could be the board's progress, and it's really the district's progress. So I think that change covers that. Thank you. Trustee Cottle, is are any of your items hanging out there still?
No, it looks good to me.
Okay. So for board policy 9050, we've had some good discussion and I think made some important updates and edits. So I'd just be looking for a motion to move forward with those suggested changes and send the policy number 9050 to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees.
So moved.
Is it 90?
It's 9055.
It's
9055.
9055.
Yeah. Sorry, thank you. I was jumping ahead.
9055 with the changes to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees. I missed who said so moved. I'm sorry.
I'll move it.
And Trustee Kennedy, so moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Trustee Kennedy, a second by Vice President Taylor. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Okay, we're moving on to 2.6, which is discussion and possible action to recommend revision and/or to forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9070, creation, adoption, revision, and deletion of Board Policy Administrative Regulation and associated documents, more specifically to clarify the policy and its purpose to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Okay, again, President Raymond, Superintendent McNeil, trustees, pleasure being here with you again. It's the 9070. Trying to thank you, Dr. Taylor, for laughing. I was trying to get a little something out of you guys.
I'm here for you, Neil. I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
Thank you. I can only see 3 of you, so I'm presuming the other 4 were really laughing. So anyway.
I'm here. I'm going to go get some cold water, but I have you. So I'm still here, but I won't be like here.
Very good.
And I meant to say that I appreciate that we've now been sitting here for over 3 hours, but I think just to keep things moving, and since we're virtual, if you need to step away to get a drink or use the facilities, please just go ahead and do that and we'll keep moving along.
Sounds good. Okay, Board Policy 9070, this falls under our office. This is a newer policy. This is some cleanup language. this is more consistent with the policy that you all adopted 9100, laying out what our policies are going to look like. I didn't think it was necessary to say these are the governing documents of the district. This is how, so we just defined these terms: board policy, administrative regulation, administrative procedures and manuals. Talked about what's a substantive change, what's not a substantive change. That's important because, as we've talked about, substantive changes, if you're making a material change at the board policy committee meeting, at the board meeting, then we send it back down to the board policy committee meeting. And then if we're making non-substantive changes, typos, number changes, we're not really changing the meaning, but we just don't like the wording, those type of things, then we just keep forwarding it. This way, the public is kept in the loop about what we are doing, which I think is the most important part of this. Then otherwise, some of the language, a lot of just cleanup type language. I guess some of it's stylistic. Also, though, I wanted to create consistency. We either need to say board policy or policy throughout, and we didn't do that. In some instances, it was policy. In some instances, it was board policy. So we changed it to board policy throughout this policy 9070. A lot of those type of things. Otherwise, this wasn't a lot, and I think I could have made the argument that these weren't substantive, but I think they were substantive enough to bring to the board because we did take out a few things and move it around. For example, I guess I should mention this: responsible office. We made that a defined word. We had defined it down below here where I'm moving around the mouse, and we moved it back up here that a responsible office is this. I don't know why we would put a definition in the middle. I'll take responsibility for that. I should have caught that before. And so we moved it back up top, just those type of things. It's just cleaner. And I think I like this policy. I think it's good guidance for us. I don't have anything else to add. And we ask that you move forward to the board when you're done discussing.
Okay, any questions, thoughts? All right, I don't see any hands raised. And I would just be looking for a motion to move motion that to accept the edits to board policy 9070 and move it to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Simon Holland, second by trustee Cottle. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that one passes unanimously. Thank you, Neil. Moving on to agenda item 2.07. This is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of board policy 9090, student performance growth, more specifically to move the policy to the 6000 series for uniformity and consistency among policies to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Good afternoon again. President Raymond, Superintendent McNeil, trustees. Board policy 9090. This, I hope, is our quickest vote of the night. It doesn't fit in your these policies. The 9000 relate to the Board of Trustees and how it's to operate, and its employees and its direct communications, basically us, meaning the Office of the General Counsel. This is a student performance growth policy. It falls under the Office of Accountability. I did reach out to Chief Hayes, Ben Hayes of that department. He agrees it should be in the 6000s, which is the policies that relate to students. And so I'm just asking for you. I don't have a number yet. I would ask that you just pass a motion that allows us to reassign to the 6000s and number it as we see fit. Numbering by law is not really technically material. It's not considered a substantive issue. If even with regard to statutes, there's all kinds of discussion about titles and things of that nature are not material. So we would just ask that it be that you allow us to move it to the 6000s. We'll get a number assigned and put it through the board in the next 2 weeks and be done with it.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Vice President Taylor, second by Trustee Simon Holland. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Great, that was the quick one. So moving on to our last item for this evening, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9115, meetings of the Board of Trustees, more specifically to clarify the policy and its purpose to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
And so, good afternoon, President Raymond, Superintendent McNeil, trustees, Board Policy 9115, meetings of the Board of Trustees. Basically, just again, a lot of cleanup. We are getting rid of these terms, governing principles and guiding practices and all of that, because one, they didn't have meaning, and we decided that we're going to stick with what was approved in the past, which is purpose, policy, definitions if needed, etc. So basically, this is how we're going to manage our meetings. I thought this policy was in pretty good shape. Obviously, I did make a lot of changes, just mostly clerical, really, from what I recall on this one, except for, sorry, I'm refreshing my own memory here, is this section down here is really all in the open meeting law. I don't know why we would put it into policy, because I really don't like copying statutes into policies, because if the statute changes and we don't realize that we have it in our policy and we don't update our policy, now we're inconsistent with statutes. So we follow the open meeting law, and we're required to follow the open meeting law, and there's no reason to have this in our policy. And so I'm recommending that we remove that portion. Otherwise, I think the policy is right on, and those are my suggested changes. And we'd ask for a motion to forward it to the board after you discuss.
Great, Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to inquire. I had talked to the superintendent via email about some protocols for board meetings, and I don't think they necessarily go in the policy, but it would be great to have some things in either administrative regulations or elsewhere, things like that contracts will be reviewed, and can't be renewed for more than 3 years without coming back to the board for action. And just some other things like Kristen, you and I have talked about before, that they may be in other places, but I don't know that they need to go in here. But I would like to, at some point, have discussion about things like, is there a threshold for what can go on consent? And it came up when we were deciding on spending $9.6 million last week, and it was on consent. I just think some of those kinds of things might be in administrative regulations or procedures, but I would love for them to be codified so that they could, board members would be able to know them. And I just invite Kristen's comment or Neil's or anyone else's.
I don't know if I would defer to Superintendent McNeil first, but I'd be happy to chime in at least a little bit on contracts.
Yeah, on the contracts, all I would say is I'm wondering if that's in our bid and quotes board policy already, and as far as the term limit.
Yeah, I believe the term limit is 3 years, at least on most of our RFQs, RFPs, depending on which one. For example, I know uniforms are coming up again, athletic uniforms, and those were 3 years. With regard to consent agenda and things of that nature, I do think if the board has the appetite to do that, we should do it in policy. And here's why I would suggest that these are the one set of policies where we can get more granular, because it's controlling what the board does. And I don't think an administrative regulation, which can be adopted by the superintendent, should affect what the board president, the board vice president, the board clerk, or any trustee wants to see. And so that would be my one concern about having a reg on the 9000 series. I do think regs apply to everything else. Don't get me wrong, and I think they serve their place. But if the board wants to limit itself, then the board should take that action and not put the superintendent in that place, if that makes sense. And I don't have a problem. I don't think we could accomplish this tonight, but if the board wants to give ideas and we can bring this one back, such as consent agendas are only going to consist of contracts up to $50,000. I don't know. I'm just throwing out a number.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to make it, cumbersome and inefficient for the operation of the government. But in terms of our transparency, and obviously we can always take things out of consent, but I think it is, that's just one example of something that I think, maybe things that are contracts more than $1 million or something, or whatever limit people feel is comfortable. But I do think that it helps people have confidence in our decision making when we actually discuss things that are pretty big ticket items. And I don't know if it's necessarily only determined by dollar value, but I would like to give trustees the opportunity to think about some of those things that, what do you want to have on the agenda or not have on the agenda as a policy matter? I'd be comfortable with adopting or, recommending this as it is right now, and then, maybe having that conversation separately later.
Sure.
And I don't know if I'm the only one that cares about that. And if I am, then, we can forget about it.
And I believe too, in that bid and quote, we do have $100,000. It is in board policy as far as what needs to be taken as far as contracts to the board. Anything greater than 100,000 or 9,000, 99,999.
Right, but some can be put on consent. They can still be put on consent, I think, which is Trustee Simon Holland's concern. If I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, that's exactly my thought.
I was just going to say, from the role I played this year, we've used the board leadership team meetings as a leadership team of the clerk and the vice president to kind of go through the consent agenda and talk through what should or shouldn't be there. And knowing that might not be what the expectation of the rest of the board members are. So I'm just saying that's how we did it for most of this year, I would say. So Vice President Taylor.
I would say that I do agree that at a certain level, and again, we can certainly discuss what that is, there is an expectation that not only does it come to the board, I think the idea is not only that it comes to the board, but that it's approved by the board. And I think in particular, when we want to make sure to do all that we can to begin to, garner, build, and steward the trust of the community. I also think that we want to make sure that as we have a conversation, whenever that is down the road, we balance that with, making sure that, how much time we really want to make sure we're spending on student achievement. I mean, we've been in such a crazy position that we've had so much other stuff going on. It's been really hard to kind of stick to those goals of it being about half of our time on student achievement, which is what effective boards do. So we want to, in that context, we still want to, 2020 notwithstanding, right? Because we know that's been kind of a crazy year, but yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I think that we want to have a conversation about, because there is a level or number. I think there is an expectation that we at least have a conversation about it, just to continue to build the trust of the community. So I'm going to be in agreement with my colleague, Katie Simon Holland, the great Katie Simon Holland.
Well, would it be a good idea if you want to move this one forward, and perhaps we have a discussion about this at some other point, and it actually might fall in a better spot, at least with consent agenda items, under agenda creation, which is the authority of the president. And that's actually the policy that we've already forwarded tonight. But I know we're just trying to get these redone so that they're nice and they're good. It doesn't mean they can't come back, you know? So I'm just wondering if that is the way to go here. Just throwing that out there.
Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. To that end, I'm just noticing in 1C, it says develop the board's annual agenda, and maybe we want to take out the word annual. Because it is, you know, we're looking at it more than just annually. But I appreciate Vice President Taylor's comment that it might be worthwhile somewhere in here to make it the policy of the board to encourage focus primarily on student achievement. That we say that about our board meetings, that our agendas, that we have an emphasis or a focus. I'm not sure how to word it or where to word it, but I think that's a valuable point, that we make sure that that's the most important thing that we care about. And I welcome suggestions because my brain is getting fried at this point.
Well, if the board has the appetite to continue this and come up with some ideas that they'd like to see in here, no rush from legal's perspective. We want you as a board to be comfortable with what we're getting accomplished here. So please don't feel obligated to just pass this just because we're asking you to.
Neil, you mentioned another policy about agenda creation. What is that one?
Sorry, I was on mute. Agenda creation falls under the authority of the board president, so I can pull that up. I have to stop sharing.
Oh, just the policy we just passed under that. Yep. Oh, I thought you meant that there was a whole policy about agenda creation. Okay.
No, there's just that part. So what I was thinking is if the trustees' concern is dealing with what the president puts on consent agenda and they want to limit the president's authority, let's say $1 million, just to use Trustee Simon Holland's example. So anything over $1 million or more can't go on consent. We could put that in there that says the president gets to make agenda for the board, with the exception that anything of $1 million or more must go on the main agenda or not on consent or something like that. We could come up with better language.
If I might, I don't want to make it so that it's like the law. You know, it doesn't have to be so rigid, but that, you know, we want to be in the interest of transparency. Agenda items over $1 million should, you know, be handled outside of consent, or however you want to say it. But yeah, that could go there, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. I think there's two issues on the table. One is making sure that we are being transparent. So what are those things that we need to do to make sure that we're transparent? And second, what do we need to do, if it's in this policy or elsewhere, to more strongly encourage a focus on student achievement and student performance as being the primary work of the board?
And to that point, you know, under policy and then one at the very end there, it said with a focus dedicated to student achievement. So maybe it would fit just under that, you know, as a bullet point, A, B, C, whatever, you know, that would get more defined about the focus on student achievement and what that might look like. And to me, that that is significant, and I know from what you said, Neil, we're looking at the next policy meeting only having 4 of the 9,000 series, or 5 of the 9,000 series.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know we're all probably hungry and getting tired, so I'm okay with, you know, we're trying to provide you with some guidance to bring that back, and not trying to wordsmith it right now, but I see lots of hands and I don't know whose was first. Trustee Minetto.
I just wanted to say I am in full support of focusing on student progress. There's so much we focus on, especially this interesting year, that I'm sorry, the name of a school doesn't really have a lot to do with, and I understand that that's important, but it doesn't have a lot to do necessarily with student progress. And I think the main thing needs to be the student progress. Thank you.
Oh, no, nobody's hands raised.
I forgot to take it down, that's why.
Well, I would suggest that we maybe continue this one. The trustees can email me individually. If you have an idea that you want added, I could then present it to you all in November. I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Or pass it now, but I get the impression that we want to add a little bit.
Superintendent McNeil, did you have a thought on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say that if you may want to think about adding that part as far as to Vice President Taylor's point, as far as, and following Trustee Minetto, as far as student progress, add that into the purpose as far as the meetings of the Board of Trustees, that if you want to raise it up to that level, then you put it under the purpose as to, you know, what is the main purpose of a Board of Trustees meeting. That was my only thought.
I think that's a good suggestion, and I think, oh, go ahead, Vice President Taylor.
No, before she said that, I was going to say, I would feel like, why don't we go ahead and pass this and then continue the work on that part? But I like yet another reason why you're the superintendent. I like what Superintendent McNeil said about that raises it to a whole nother level, and it really keeps it on the radar as to it being our primary focus. And we know best practices say at least 50% of our time. And that we can even go as far as to say that we want to follow the best practices of approximately 50%. Not that it must, but you know, that's our intention, 50% of our time and attention being on student achievement. So we might be able to get there with that addition. Kristen had more coffee than the rest of us, so she's still sharp.
How's that?
Maybe add a primary focus dedicated to student achievement.
And so would this satisfy that desire for everyone then? The addition of that?
I just don't think
And
that's
state purpose?
needed, if I may suggest. I think it should just read like that. Because you have to earn the trust of the community, and you're going to earn it by doing these two things. You're not going to earn it. You don't just get it. That's my opinion.
That works for me.
Would you like a motion, Madam President,
I think we are ready.
Yeah, let's see, let me go back to my board docs and find out what I'm moving. Okay, this is, so I would move that we forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9115 to a future regular meeting of Board Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval, and that trustees will consider other revisions in the future, something like that. And yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Second.
Okay, a motion by trustee Simon Holland, a second by trustee Minetto. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion passes unanimously. That completes the action items for the policies. Next agenda item is 3.01, which is public comment. And so I will ask our.
We don't have no public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeannie, right?
Right.
Sorry, I get that one confused. I appreciate your joining us today and the work you did to help get us prepared and do all these notes.
Thank you.
Our next board policy meeting is on Tuesday, November 17th at 2 p.m. and it is via Zoom again. And that takes us to the adjournment of the meeting. Thank you all very much.
Neil, good
Hi,
job.
everyone.
Thanks, Neil.